Chapter 992. What did it mean to be evil? The moment Zhang Shi attacked the leader of Jinling, Lu Tianling, Laozu, Zhang Shi's mood could fully explain his actions. Zhang Shi was also a quick-witted person. After the Blue Sea sect suffered a great loss at Frost Island, Zhang Shi instinctively suspected that the matters in the Northwest Sea realm were not as simple as he had imagined. Therefore, after the matter at Frost Island, Zhang Shi left the Blue Sea sect and wanted to investigate the Northwest Sea realm. Sure enough, not long after Zhang Shi arrived in the Northwest Sea, he quickly sensed the earthquake coming from the southwest of the Northwest Sea. That was the sea where the Blue Sea sect had schemed against Jinling's secret mineral vein and was captured alive by Lu Ping. At this time, if Zhang Shi still could not guess that Jinling really had a plan here, then he would not be Zhang Shi. Although Zhang Shi had received a blow from Lu Ping after advancing to the mid-Dharma stage, and was seriously injured by Lu Ping, who was only at the early Dharma stage, this was not to say that Zhang Shi's ability was weak. It was because Lu Ping's ability was too amazing. On the contrary, the fact that Zhang Shi was able to achieve supreme power after advancing to the mid-Dharma stage meant that Zhang Shi's ability was really close to Jiang Tianlin's. Therefore, after Zhang Shi searched the nearby sea for more than half a day, he finally found traces of Lu Tianling at the bottom of the sea. However, Lu Tianling was limited by his own level of cultivation and did not notice Zhang Shi quietly approaching. Zhang Shi hid in the distance and looked in the direction of Lu Tianling. The constantly turbulent fire vein and the messy formation around the fire vein immediately let Zhang Shi know that this time, he had probably really found some secret of Jinling. Although the fire vein was extremely far away, Zhang Shi could still tell that it was an extremely high-quality fire vein. Otherwise, Lu Tianling wouldn't have to personally guard it. There was no doubt that this fire vein was attractive to Zhang Shi, but this way, he would have to face Lu Tianling personally. This was a sect master, and although his strength was not as strong as him, his status was far above him. If he really tried to snatch it, then Jinling would definitely take it as a declaration of war, and the situation of the Azure Sea sect, which was already in a passive position, would definitely become even worse. Zhang Shi weighed the pros and cons again and again. In the end, he decided to retreat. At this moment, the situation of the Azure Sea sect did not allow him to do anything that could not be measured. Even so, after he left here, as long as he released the news that Jinling was here, he believed that many sects in the North Sea would be interested. The so-called sharing of benefits was first proposed by Jinling himself. Now he would give them a taste of their own medicine and discuss them. However, just as Zhang Shi decided to retreat, the giant volcano that Lu Ping was guarding under the guidance of Lu Qiner happened to erupt at this time. The strong earthquake once again affected the fire vein under Lu Tianling's feet, causing the originally sealed fire vein to shake again. Lu Tianling had no choice but to split his attention to suppress it. Zhang Shi's eyes flashed with a cold light. At this time, he suddenly realized that Lu Tianling had bound the fire vein under his feet, but did not pull it. It must have something to do with the previous earthquake, and Lu Tianling had to suppress the fire vein. So naturally, he did not have the energy to check the situation of the earthquake just now. This meant that there must be other Dharma adepts of Jinling there to investigate, or else he would not let the dignified leader, Jinling, guard a fire vein. So what on earth affected this fire vein? Not only did Jinling not pull the fire vein, but Lu Tianling's expression seemed very serious, as if there was a great danger hidden within. At this time, the eruption of the giant volcano that Lu Ping was guarding had reached its peak. With the eruption of magma, the entire earth vein was lifted, causing the earthquake to become even more intense. The fire vein under Lu Tianling's feet was also getting more and more violent, and the impact on the suppression formation that spiritual master Xianwei had set up was also getting more and more intense. Lu Tianling still spared no effort to suppress the fire vein under her feet, and finally, the cold light in Zhang Shi's eyes became more and more intense. What on earth was on the other side of the fire vein? And Lu Tianling seemed to be very afraid of the fire vein under her feet, as if she was afraid of something. What on earth was she afraid of? The cautious Zhang Shi guessed that he seemed to be getting closer and closer to Jinling's plan, but he still decided to go along the general direction of the fire vein to take a look. At this time, the earthquake kept coming, which also pointed Zhang Shi in the right direction. Underwater volcanoes. It was actually underwater volcanoes. Yes, in the world of practice, volcanoes that had just erupted often had spiritual fires of heaven and earth, and this seemingly endless underwater volcano group had many volcanoes. If spiritual master Jinling was allowed to search for volcanoes that were about to erupt one by one, how many spiritual fires of heaven and earth would fall into Jinling's hands? No, I can't let this huge resource be monopolized by Jinling, and I can't even let Jinling enjoy this information for too long. That would also allow Jinling to reap the benefits of this volcano group in advance. Zhang Shi turned around and was about to leave, but at this moment, several jade slips fell into Lu Tianling's hands. These were the messages sent by the few Dharma adepts who entered the volcano group to report their safety to each other. Zhang Shi's heart skipped a beat. It turned out that there were at least 5 people in this volcano group. At this time, in order for Jinling to keep the secret, and at the same time ensure that he could get as close to the erupting volcanoes as possible, only Dharma adepts could enter. If I suddenly attack Lu Tianling and seriously injure or kill him, then break the seal of the fire vein. Once the entire underwater volcano group erupts, how many of the 5 Jinling Dharma adepts would be able to survive? This thought emerged in Zhang Shi's fiery heart, and he could no longer suppress this thought in his heart. Previously, he was afraid of Lu Tianling's identity as the head of the sect. If he suddenly attacked and killed him, even if he was seriously injured, and then chased after him, who in the world of practice would know that it was him? Even if he couldn't kill Lu Tianling, as long as he reopened the seal of the fire vein, once the volcano group erupted, 2 or 3 of the 5 Dharma adepts would die. Even if the remaining ones survived, they would probably be seriously injured. At that time, Jinling would be greatly injured, and why would the Songhai sect be afraid of an injured tiger? As for the possibility that Lu Tianling was not killed by him, and the seal of the fire vein could not be broken, Zhang Shi did not even think about it. What a joke! With Zhang Shi's strength, in the entire North Sea, other than the monster Lu Tianping, among the adepts of the same level, only Jiang Tianlin could be considered a match for him. Lu Tianling was just an early Dharma adept. How could he be a match for him? No matter how cautious Zhang Shi was, in the end, he could not resist the temptation of the possibility of killing a few Dharma adepts of Jinling. The blood-orange sword made a sneak attack, and sure enough, it succeeded and seriously injured Lu Tianling. However, the development of the situation was still unexpected. Zhang Shi naturally expected that Lu Tianling had a spirit treasure that was passed down by Jinling as the head of the sect, but he did not expect that Lu Tianling's level of practice had already reached the peak of the early Dharma stage. However, what surprised Zhang Shi even more than Lu Tianling's level of practice was his strength. Lu Tianling, who was suddenly attacked, suddenly turned around and threw a lightning whip. The flashing lightning followed the trail of the whip and rippled in the sea, forming a huge ball of lightning that suddenly exploded towards Zhang Shi. Divine thunder. It was the divine thunder again. And this kind of power was obviously a natural great spell. He did not expect that Lu Tianling had actually formed a natural great spell. This was not the most important thing. What really made Zhang Shi afraid was the lightning whip in Lu Tianling's hand. It was different from the blood-orange sword that Zhang Shi had obtained from the Blood Shura's companion spirit treasure, which had been modified into a spirit treasure. The lightning whip in Lu Tianling's hand was a genuine spirit treasure, and its quality was far above the blood-orange sword. When Lu Tianling's Kuei water divine ability was unleashed through the lightning whip, the power it displayed was no longer as simple as adding the two together. Zhang Shi screamed and quickly retreated. Even though he was in the mid-Dharma stage, he was sure that this move could not be resisted. However, in this moment, Lu Tianling had already regained his senses. He looked at Zhang Shi as if he was looking at a dead man. Zhang Shi, how dare you? However, at this time, Zhang Shi was already like an arrow on a bow. This matter had already been done, And there was no time for Zhang Shi to regret it. The blood-orange sword moved horizontally, and this time, it was no longer aimed at Lu Tianling. Instead, it was aimed at the seal under Lu Tianling's feet. You dare! Lu Tianling panicked, and quickly used the lightning whip to block with all his strength. However, his cultivation was not as strong as Zhang Shi's. Although he was lucky enough to block this attack, he had already been pushed back tens of feet. Lu Tianling threw out a jade slip towards the direction of the volcanoes. He quickly moved forward with the intention of blocking Zhang Shi's attack again, but it was already too late. Zhang Shi's blood-orange sword was already stabbing towards the spiritual energy rope that was revealed by the seal. Seeing that the seal was about to be destroyed by Zhang Shi, Lu Tianling even felt a little desperate. However, unexpectedly, a pu sound was heard. The spiritual energy rope was cut, but the fire vein was still not released. Wah! Spiritual Master Xianwei appeared in another corner of the seal. His entire face had turned purple gold, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. However, his hand was still holding onto another spiritual energy rope as he smiled proudly at Zhang Shi. Zhang Shi's sword attack was actually blocked by a mid-core forging stage cultivator. This was enough to make Zhang Shi angry. You're courting death. At this time, Zhang Shi could see that the entire seal was very strange. It probably came from the mid-core forging stage cultivator in front of him. As long as he killed this person, the entire fire vein would definitely explode. However, at this time, a delicate shout came from afar. Zhang Shi, it's you! A seven-colored flame suddenly bloomed in front of Spiritual Master Xianwei, blocking Zhang Shi's sure-kill sword attack again. Mei Tianqin Laozu, who had just returned from Middle-earth, finally arrived in time and joined hands with Lu Tianling to fight against Zhang Shi. Zhang Shi's heart couldn't help but sink again and again. At this time, a roar that made Zhang Shi's heart tremble finally came. Zhang Shi, you're courting death. A pair of familiar long swords cut through the layers of water and shot straight towards Zhang Shi. Hearing the sound of Lu Ping rushing over, Mei Tianqin and Lu Tianling's spirits were lifted. The two of them worked together to restrain Zhang Shi from the other side and coordinated with Lu Ping's attack. However, Zhang Shi had no fighting spirit at this time. When Lu Ping's roar came, he turned around and flew towards the depths of the sea. A space door suddenly split open in the sea. Although there was great pressure at the bottom of the sea, it still couldn't hinder Lu Ping's space ability in the slightest. Lu Ping took a step forward and looked at Lu Tianling and Mei Tianqin. He turned around and was about to chase, but he heard Lu Tianling say, "Don't chase, he wants to escape. Even if you're stronger than him, you won't be able to catch him. I'm afraid the news of the underground volcanoes won't be able to be hidden for long. At most 2 hours, this news will spread throughout the North Sea cultivation world. At that time, a large number of North Sea Laozu will arrive. Clean up the things in your bowl first." Hearing this, Lu Ping could only turn around and walk in front of Lu Tianling to check her injuries. This caused Lu Ping to frown. Zhang Shi's sword was extremely vicious. It was clearly aimed at Lu Tianling's life. This kind of injury seemed to be related to the strange blood-orange sword in his hand. Lu Tianling was bleeding nonstop. Lu Ping rummaged through his interspatial artifact and took out a bell cauldron pellet. He fed it to Lu Tianling, then changed his hand seals several times. Finally, he cast a healing art he got from Fei Ling's sect's secret purple jade scroll and stopped the bleeding from Lu Tianling's wound. Lu Ping then took out a jade bottle from his storage magic artifact and poured out a sticky but colorless liquid. A strange fragrance immediately filled the air. Mei Tianqin's eyes twitched. This liquid was obviously a kind of spirit liquid made with the amethyst royal jelly as the main ingredient. And with Lu Ping using it without caring about the cost, the amethyst royal jelly, that could be used to make countless dharma pills, was smeared on Lu Tianling's wound. This was a kind of wound medicine made by Lu Ping using the amethyst royal jelly as the main ingredient, and then mixed with several kinds of spirit liquids brewed by Linglong Wine Cauldron. It had a miraculous effect on wounds caused by various spells and spells. An overwhelming pressure suddenly descended. Celestial Elephant Laozu followed closely behind Lu Ping. When he saw Lu Ping and Mei Tianqin, He was obviously stunned. However, when he saw Lu Tianling's pale face due to excessive blood loss, he became angry and said, "Did you see clearly? Is it really Zhang Shi from Songhai sect? There's no mistake, it's him." The one who answered was Lu Ping. He had fought Zhang Shi before, so he was very familiar with his aura. Not to mention, Lu Ping had the 3 pure true pupils, so there was no way he would mistake Zhang Shi for someone else. Songhai sect Zhang Shi. Celestial Elephant Laozu was so angry that he laughed. Chapter 993. Under Lu Tianling's persuasion, Celestial Phenomenon Laozu finally gave up on the idea of going to the Songhai sect. Instead, he personally replaced Lu Tianling to guard the Fire Vein Seal. With Celestial Phenomenon Laozu personally guarding the Fire Vein Seal, unless Dao Sheng Laozu came, no one in the North Sea would dare to provoke him. The Fire Vein Seal was naturally safe. Lu Tianling and Spiritual Master Xianwei, who had also been fed a Bell Cauldron pill, were sent back to Tianling Mountain. Gua Tianshan Laozu of Frost Island had been urgently recalled. Tian Fan and Tian Shui had also gathered the first batch of Jinling's core forging adepts, as well as a batch of non-fire element alchemists and craftsmen who had reached the core forging stage. They could rush to the Northwest Sea at any time, and the 2 of them were already heading there. After Lu Tianling returned to Tianling Mountain, the sect protecting formation was fully activated. At the same time, a summons from the sect leader was issued. The entire Jinling was on its way back from the Central Plains. Tianfeng Laozu was already on his way back from the Central Plains. Later, Lu Tianling, in the name of the Jinling sect leader, sent out a summons to the entire North Sea training world. He told the entire North Sea that Zhang Shi had previously assassinated the Jinling sect leader and attempted to murder several Dharma adepts of Jinling. He also said that if the Songhai sect did not give an explanation, the entire Jinling sect would not hesitate to fight with the Songhai sect. At the same time, he also spread the news that the volcanoes in the Northwest Sea were about to erupt to the entire North Sea training world. He invited the entire North Sea training world to go to the Northwest Sea to capture the heaven and earth spirit fire that might appear on a large scale. At the same time, the entire North Sea training world, which had originally been skeptical about the news from the Songhai sect, had no more doubts after receiving the summons from the Jinling sect leader. They immediately began to move. There were crisscrossing lights flashing above the various sections. Many Dharma adepts had already gone to the Northwest Sea. However, the remaining cultivators still needed to be mobilized, and were already far behind the Jinling cultivators, who were on standby on Floating Island. As for the matter of Zhang Shi assassinating Lu Tianling and plotting to kill Jinling and several Laozus, this Zhang Shi really dared to do it. Why didn't he succeed? But what does this matter have to do with my sect? I'll just watch the show from the side. But I still have to talk about morality. When the time comes, I'll inevitably criticize the Blue Sea sect, but in reality, I'll just remain neutral. Laozu's thoughts were basically the same, but perhaps Jinling wanted this kind of attitude from the various sections. As long as he stood on the moral high ground, suppressing the Azure Sea sect would become a matter of course. At this moment, Lu Ping and the others had once again returned to the volcanic cluster. Everyone flew across the vast volcanic cluster, seizing the time to search for traces of volcanoes that might erupt. Clearly they were pressed for time. Lu Ping looked at the huge mountain in front of him that had stopped erupting, but was still constantly rising. He turned to Lu Qin'er and said, "Qin'er, you go take a look at other places. After 4 hours, regardless of whether you find anything or not, immediately withdraw from this sea area." After Lu Ping said that, he took out the Nachuan cauldron. The Nachuan cauldron grew to a height of 3 meters in midair. Lu Ping jumped into the cauldron and fell towards the crater of the volcano. As the Nachuan cauldron fell, although Lu Ping's body was inside the Nachuan cauldron, he could still feel the surrounding temperature rising. It was as if his whole body had fallen into a heated pot. Lu Ping tried his best to control the speed of the Nachuan cauldron's fall. At the same time, he also had to help the Nachuan cauldron resist the surrounding scorching temperature. Although Lu Ping's water attribute Zhen yuan had a great effect in resisting the high temperature of the surrounding magma. The Zhen yuan around his body was being consumed at an extremely fast speed. This was because Lu Ping had not yet fallen into the magma of the crater of the volcano. If he fell in, no matter how vigorous the Zhen yuan around Lu Ping's body was, it was unknown whether he could last for a long time. Therefore, Lu Ping had to find the spiritual fire, hidden in the magma, in the shortest time possible. Plop! With a muffled sound, Lu Ping felt that the entire Nachuan cauldron suddenly began to float up and down. The surrounding temperature of the cauldron walls rose again. Lu Ping could clearly feel that the consumption of his Zhen yuan had suddenly increased. Lu Ping knew that he had fallen into the magma of the volcano. Lu Ping's divine sense quickly overflowed and extended in all directions. He even tried his best to explore the depths of the magma in an attempt to find traces of the spiritual fire. However, he found nothing. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and patted the wall of the Nachuan cauldron. A purple-blue Zhen yuan was injected into the Nachuan cauldron. The originally continuously rising temperature was immediately alleviated. Lu Ping stamped his feet, and the Nachuan cauldron immediately sank dozens of feet into the magma. Lu Ping's divine sense seemed to have captured something. He hurriedly controlled the Nachuan cauldron to chase after it. However, he discovered that there was a fist-sized fiery red bead looming in the magma. This bead was naturally not the heaven and earth spiritual fire. However, what exactly was it? Lu Ping's current knowledge could be said to be broad. However, he did not know what this bead was. However, to be able to exist in this high-temperature magma, this bead itself could be considered a kind of treasure. Lu Ping tried his best to control his divine sense to bind this bead. Then, a dense Zhen yuan exploded from the mouth of the Nachuan cauldron. It opened up a small space at the mouth of the cauldron. The Nachuan cauldron quickly opened up and absorbed the bead into the alchemy furnace. Lu Ping held the bead in his hand and carefully examined it. However, apart from being able to sense that this bead contained a large amount of fire attribute energy, he still could not figure out the use of this bead. The Nachuan cauldron continued to appear in the magma. Fortunately, the quality of the Nachuan cauldron was high enough. In addition, Lu Ping's water attribute Zhen yuan happened to be able to restrain the fire attribute of the magma. Moreover, Lu Ping's Zhen yuan was also vigorous enough. Therefore, he was able to last until now. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 hours had passed. There was only 1 hour left from the 4 hours. However, Lu Ping still had no clue about the trace of the spiritual fire. However, Lu Ping did not gain nothing during this period of time. At least, Lu Ping could sense that after he continuously poured his Zhen yuan into the Nachuan cauldron, under the endless high temperature of the magma around the Nachuan cauldron, some impurities that he had never discovered before were slowly being purified. The quality of the Nachuan cauldron also seemed to be improving at a slow speed. Just as the Nachuan cauldron began to slowly turn red under the scorching magma, under Lu Ping's surprised gaze, a picture slowly began to appear on the inner wall of the Nachuan cauldron. It became clearer and clearer. This was Lu Ping's face was frequently intertwined with surprise and shock. In the end, he slowly restrained all his emotions. At this moment, Lu Ping's divine sense, which was scattered in the depths of the magma, suddenly felt a sharp pain. This pain was exactly the same as the feeling of being burned by the flame. Originally, although Lu Ping's divine sense was greatly affected in the magma, this influence ultimately only hindered the range of the divine sense's exploration. The magma itself did little harm to Lu Ping's divine sense. Something that could hurt Lu Ping's divine sense, even if it was not the spiritual fire, was probably some kind of rare treasure. It was enough for Lu Ping to make up his mind to explore it. Lu Ping drove the Zhen yuan in his body, and the Nachuan cauldron sank another 100 feet. The consumption of the Zhen yuan in his body was even more intense. The pure yang pearl in the core space could not be bothered to play around. It spat out a mouthful of origin qi, and the Zhen yuan in Lu Ping's bloodline, which was about to be exhausted, suddenly came to life. Lu Ping's divine sense stretched out towards the depths of the magma, and finally captured the thing that could burn Lu Ping's divine sense. Lu Ping's divine sense once again felt like it was being burned. Lu Ping's eyes suddenly lit up. This time, Lu Ping would rather endure the pain of the burning and try his best to wrap his divine sense around this thing. It really was a spiritual fire. It was actually this thing. There were several kinds of heaven and earth spiritual fires that could cause damage to divine sense. However, due to the different grades of the fire, the damage to the cultivator's divine sense also varied. However, if one were to ask what kind of spiritual fire could cause the most damage to the cultivator's divine sense, it would undoubtedly be the jade phosphorus soul fire, a high-grade heaven and earth spiritual fire. At this time, Lu Ping could no longer describe his good luck. In a volcano, he had actually found the 4-inch spiritual flame and the jade phosphorus soul fire, two extremely special spiritual fires. If this were to spread out, it was unknown how many cultivators would be envious of him. Originally, with Lu Ping's current cultivation and status, besides the heaven and earth spiritual fire needed for alchemy, most of the spiritual objects in the world were no longer of special importance to him. After all, these spiritual objects no longer had a decisive impact on the cultivator. However, for an alchemist, the 4-inch spiritual flame was one of the few flames that could arouse the interest of Lu Ping. Similarly, for a cultivator who attached great importance to the battle of divine sense, the jade phosphorus soul fire was also a kind of spiritual object that was highly valued. The uniqueness of the jade phosphorus soul fire was that it was extremely harmful to the divine sense of a cultivator. This made the jade phosphorus soul fire the best weapon for the divine sense of a cultivator. Regardless of whether it was for attack or defense, the power displayed by the jade phosphorus soul fire made all the cultivators who relied on divine sense wary of using it. Lu Ping's divine sense was already different from ordinary people. If he could refine the jade phosphorus soul fire into his divine sense, Lu Ping was confident that even a Dharma adept would not be able to hurt him in a battle of divine sense. He had to get his hands on this item. Lu Ping had an expression of throwing caution to the wind. With a sudden stomp of his feet, the Nachuan cauldron sank again. At this time, it was already more than 100 feet deep in the magma. Even though the Nachuan cauldron was of high quality, it had already been burned red. Lu Ping, who was in the cauldron, was sweating profusely. The heaven flower water curtain, that was propped up to protect his body, had already been burnt by the high temperature layer by layer. Meanwhile, Lu Ping's inner yuan was continuously being injected into it, supporting the heaven flower water curtain layer by layer. It's here. Lu Ping suddenly opened the Nachuan cauldron. 12 gentian pearls shot out from the cauldron. A white light shot out from a white lotus that flashed behind Lu Ping. It immediately hit the seemingly illusory flame. Then, the gentian pearls surrounded the flame. Linglong was in the depths of the wine cauldron. The Nachuan cauldron sucked in the air, and then quickly retreated back into the Dao cauldron. The jade phosphorus soul fire finally couldn't hold on any longer, and was absorbed into the Nachuan cauldron. Lu Ping didn't have time to check on the flame that was colliding around in the Nachuan cauldron. The Nachuan cauldron shook and quickly shot towards the surface of the magma in the crater. Chapter 994. At the same time, in the sky above the Northwest Sea, there were already dozens of Dharma power Laozu gathered in the sky above the fire vein that celestial phenomenon Laozu was guarding. However, none of the Laozu from the various sects rushed to the bottom of the sea to search for the heaven and earth spirit fire. Instead, they waited quietly on the surface of the sea, as if waiting for one of the sects to come forward and negotiate with celestial phenomenon Laozu. It was not that they could not enter the underwater volcanoes, but after what had happened to Zhangxi, many of the Laozu had each learned their lesson. If the seal of the fire vein was broken, it would naturally be possible to bury the Jinling Dharma adept, who was currently searching for the heaven and earth spirit fire in the volcanoes. However, at this time with celestial phenomenon around, naturally no one had any ideas about the fire vein. However, what if after others entered the underwater volcanoes, Jinling suddenly withdrew and then activated the heaven and earth spirit fire? A breeze suddenly swirled on the quiet sea, and Dao Sheng Laozu suddenly appeared in front of all the Dharma adepts. Greetings, my friend Dao Sheng. Greetings, Senior Dao Sheng. Dozens of Dharma adepts bowed together, showing the status of Dao Sheng Laozu in the North Sea. Although Zhenling had become the #1 sect in the North Sea, and Celestial Phenomenon Laozu was also the only 2 Dharma adepts in the North Sea, and Xianling sect was now declining, Dao Sheng Laozu's reputation as the #1 person in the North Sea had not been affected in the slightest. Even if Celestial Phenomenon Laozu became a Dharma adept, it still could not shake Dao Sheng Laozu's position in the North Sea. Dao Sheng Laozu's prestige was not because of his own cultivation, but because he had killed his way out of the deep sea demon region. Over the past hundreds of years, Dao Sheng Laozu had always been the backbone of the human clan in resisting the attacks of the demon clan. In several one-on-one battles, he had defeated 2 great cultivators of the primordial giant crocodile clan. Dao Sheng Laozu lightly nodded his head at the crowd. After that, his silhouette flickered as he disappeared from the surface of the sea. At the location where the fire vein was sealed, Tianxiang Laozu sensed something. He abruptly raised his head and saw a spatial rift opening up in the sea several tens of feet in front of him. Dao Sheng Laozu stepped out from within. "Brother Tianxiang, your sect has taken the lead again. Don't let the other fellow Taoists wait for too long." Celestial Phenomenon Laozu smiled. "Sure." After saying that, he waved his hand, and a few golden lights disappeared in a flash. He then turned around and said, "In the time it takes for an incense to burn, the old man will open the seal of the fire vein and lead it to Tianling Mountain." Looking at the pure and powerful fire vein under Tianxiang Laozu's feet, even someone like Dao Sheng Laozu could not help but feel a trace of jealousy in his eyes. "Brother Tianxiang is really lucky," Tianxiang Laozu said with a hint of pride. "It's just luck. No one expected that after mining a small mineral vein, a fire vein would be drawn out." Outside the tall volcano more than 100 miles away, Lu Qiner anxiously circled around the top of the volcano. She had been holding a jade slip in her hand for 15 minutes. The 4 hours were getting closer and closer, but Lu Ping still had not come out of the crater. The underwater mountain was only a few thousand feet away from the surface. Once the fire vein seal was undone, the entire volcano chain would erupt. At that time, Lu Ping wouldn't even have a chance to escape from the crater of the volcano. Just as Lu Qiner was hesitating whether to land on the edge of the crater to take a look, a muffled sound came from the magma in the crater. Lu Qiner's first reaction was that the volcano was about to erupt, because it was already the 4-hour mark. She was about to escape with the waterproof pearl. But then she thought that if this was the case, the movement of the volcanic eruption would not be so small. Then there was only one possibility. Lu Qiner was overjoyed. When she turned around, she saw Lu Ping coming out of the Nachuan cauldron, his entire body looking like it was being boiled. The cauldron itself looked like it was being quenched, causing the seawater around it to sizzle. Even when Lu Ping put the cauldron back into his interspatial mystic artifact, the temperature still didn't drop. "Brother, let's go. The 4 hours are almost up." Tianxiang Laozu has already sent a communication jade slip. Compared to whether Lu Ping had obtained the spiritual fire in the volcano, Lu Qiner was obviously more concerned about Lu Ping's safety. After seeing that there were no injuries on Lu Ping's body, she handed over the jade slip she had received earlier to Lu Ping. Lu Ping was shocked. He did not care about the loss of the inner yuan in his body due to the volcanic magma. He directly put Lu Qiner into the golden house, and then turned into a stream of water and fled to the area where the fire vein was sealed. Tianxiang Laozu was guarding the fire vein. Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Lu, Tian Jiang, Tian Qin and Tian Sheng, 6 Dharma adepts stood behind Tianxiang Laozu. In front of him, there were more than 10 Dharma adepts from various sects led by Dao Sheng Laozu. "Brother Tianxiang, the time has passed. Don't let the various sects cultivators wait too long." Dao Sheng Laozu was silent for a moment, and finally spoke up to urge Tianxiang. Tianxiang Laozu opened his eyes slightly and said, "There is still one person from our sect who has not returned yet. Please wait for a moment, Brother Dao Sheng. That Lu Tianping has not appeared yet. Could it be that he has already fallen in the volcano?" Behind Dao Sheng Laozu, Feng Shidao could not help but speak sarcastically. As soon as he said this, The 7 Dharma adepts on Jinling's side were all angered. The aura of the 7 Dharma adepts came crashing down on Feng Shidao. Even Dao Sheng Laozu did not dare to face it head-on. Feng Shidao was even forced back by the aura, and he almost fell to the ground on his, but to embarrass himself. His face was already red from holding back. 2 mid-Dharma adepts suddenly appeared in the depths of the sea. The 2 of them attacked at the same time, and together with Dao Sheng Laozu, they finally managed to temporarily weaken the aura of Jinling's side. Feng Shidao was able to catch his breath, and at the same time, he raised his own aura again, intending to join the battle. These 2 mid-Dharma adepts who had just appeared and dared to join the conflict between Dao Jinling and Xianling sect were not strangers. One of them was Dongyi Laozu of the Vast Sea sect, while the other shocked many of the Dharma adepts. It was the easternmost Laozu, who had long announced that he would soon break through to the mid-Dharma stage and become a great adept. However, at this time, the easternmost Laozu's aura was overflowing, and everyone could already sense that he had not entered the late Dharma stage. He was still at the mid-Dharma stage, but it was obvious that he had reached the peak of the mid-Dharma stage. The rumor that he was about to become the 3rd great adept in the North Sea training world was not groundless after all. Seeing this, Dao Yin and Lin Xuqing also hurriedly joined the battle. Dao Sheng Laozu and the easternmost Laozu's side immediately turned the tables. However, with the cooperation of the 2 Laozus, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, Jinling's side was still able to maintain a balance with the 2 sections. Right at this time, the spatial door at the bottom of the sea opened up again. Donghua and the 2 Vast Sea sect cultivators from the East Lake sect rushed over as well. One of them was at the mid-Dharma stage, while the other was at the early Dharma stage. After the 2 of them joined the battle, the tables were turned once again, and Jinling's side was now at a complete disadvantage. Just as the seal on the fire vein was about to be broken by the Dharma adepts of the Xianling and Vast Sea sect, a long whistle suddenly rang out. The faces of Jinling and the other Dharma adepts lit up with joy. A divine will that was as sharp as a flying sword slashed towards them. However, this divine will seemed to contain a burning sensation that made one's heart palpitate. Donghua and the 2 Laozus from the East Lake sect clutched their heads and cried out in pain. Sweat dripped down their foreheads as they hurriedly retreated. Lu Ping had captured the jade phosphorus soulfire. Although he had yet to fully refine it, he could already make use of it with his immense spiritual will. Giant waves that were tens or even hundreds of feet high were rolling and crashing in all directions. Many Dharma adepts who were closer to the Northwest Sea had a change of expression on their faces. They hurriedly sent messages back to their respective sects, instructing them to activate the protective formation to defend against the tsunamis that were hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of miles wide. Chapter 995. With the passage of time, the violent turbulence of the sea finally began to slow down. However, the rolling waves and rising steam made it seem as if the entire Northwest Sea was boiling. Lu Ping knew that this was the underwater volcano erupting. At the same time, it was also rising towards the surface of the sea. However, at this time, he could not care about the situation around him like the other Dharma adepts. At the same time, intentionally or unintentionally, he and the other Dharma adepts began to occupy their own territories in midair. After coming out from the mouth of the volcano, Lu Ping had actually used up quite a lot of his inner yuan. Fortunately, his inner yuan was much stronger than that of ordinary people. However, when he had rushed to the place where the fire vein was sealed, the inner yuan in his body had already been used up by more than half. Otherwise, he would not have needed to borrow the power of the Jade Soul Fire. Although the Jade Soul Fire was a spiritual fire of the heavens and earth, if it was not refined by true essence, it could only be used by planting a seed in this spiritual fire using divine sense. Lu Ping's body was filled with water-based inner yuan, so refining this spirit fire naturally took twice the effort for half the result. Fortunately, Lu Ping's divine will was strong, so he was able to do it with ease. Lu Ping floated in midair, holding a top-grade spirit stone in his hand, as he began to recover the inner yuan in his body. At the same time, in his heart's core space, The Linglong wine cauldron was also emitting a dense mist. The dragon Dharma power opened its mouth and inhaled. This dense mist was continuously refined by the Dharma power and fed back into Lu Ping's blood. The inner yuan in his body began to recover quickly. Using top-grade spirit stones to replenish the inner yuan in one's body was a luxury even for Dharma adepts. The scarcity of top-grade spirit stones meant that Dharma adepts would usually only use top-grade spirit stones during training. Just to replenish the inner yuan in one's body, high-grade spirit stones were more than enough. However, when Lu Ping had captured He Shiyun alive, he had naturally robbed her as well. Besides the few treasures that He Shiyun had kept in his heart's core space, Lu Ping had basically taken everything from her body. Among them were 6 or 7 top-grade spirit stones, which He Shiyun had probably accumulated over the years. Now all of them had gone to Lu Ping. Lu Ping, who had gained some extra income, naturally did not mind using a top-grade spirit stone to quickly recover his inner yuan. The North Sea cultivators were indeed incomparable to the East Ocean Crystal Palace cultivators of the same level. Back then Lu Ping killed ancestor Kuan-Yu, who was also at the early Dharma stage, had more than 20 top-grade spirit stones on him. The difference in treatment between the two cultivators was like heaven and earth. While Celestial Laozu and the others tried to expand their Jinling range in mid-air, they also surrounded Lu Ping to prevent him from being disturbed. At this time, a new round of struggle between the various sects and Laozu had begun once again. The rising water vapor formed a thick, red poisonous fog on the surface of the sea, constantly obscuring people's vision, and even hindering the detection of the adepts' divine will. Fortunately, there were Dharma adepts everywhere in the sky, so they did not care too much about the poison in the fog. However, in order to expand their respective territories as much as possible, everyone still began to suppress the fog that rose from the surface of the sea. The fog was suppressed again and again, forming a layer of red poisonous fog that was 10 feet high on the surface of the sea. The tumbling seawater was already covered by the thick fog, but the tumbling fog was still able to indicate the situation at the bottom of the sea to the adepts. The seawater within a radius of 1,000 miles was boiling, and the red fog was rising. All the adepts on the surface of the sea were secretly shocked as they tried to occupy their territory. From the looks of it, the entire group of volcanoes under the sea was equivalent to a giant island with a radius of 1,000 miles. On top of it, there must be a huge mountain range. If the entire mountain range was a group of volcanoes, there must be thousands, or even tens of thousands of them. However, everyone in Jinling had already expected this, so they just blindly formed a huge encirclement in mid-air, constantly occupying the area above the sea. At this time, the adepts of the various sects had also reacted. Countless communication jade slips were once again sent out in all directions, beginning to call for reinforcements from their respective sections. Some of the sects that were closer to the Northwest Sea had already sent their adepts over to join in the encirclement of the various sections. However, in front of Jinling, even excluding Lu Ping, there were still 7 Dharma adepts. The other sects, like Xianling sect and Songhai sect, were far from being able to compete with them. Just at this moment, several powerful beams of light cut into the formation that the Dharma adepts had formed on the surface of the sea, causing the cultivators of the various sects to be enraged. However, when they saw the people in the beams of light, they had no choice but to give up and cease their attacks. Wu Shihuan, Cheng Shizhuang, Ma Shifeng and Zhang Shiji, these 4 adepts of the Crystal Palace had joined Xianling sect's camp, causing Xianling sect's power to increase greatly. The area that they occupied above the sea instantly doubled. The Dharma adepts of the neighboring sects of Xianling sect had no choice but to retreat in the face of the fierce reputation of the Crystal Palace. In an instant, the area that Xianling sect occupied exceeded that of Jinling. Another few beams of light flew over. Dong Kuan had also rushed over with He Shiyun and Wang Xiqing. Out of the 5 mid-Dharma adepts of the Songhai sect, 4 had arrived. Only Zhang Shi had not appeared until now. With 4 mid-Dharma adepts and 3 early Dharma adepts, the area that the Songhai sect occupied also expanded rapidly. However, Zhenling had no intention of competing with these two sections. They only occupied the area of the sea according to their own rhythm. Also, unlike the other sects who occupied the area blindly, the positions of the few Laozu of Zhenling on the sea were much more orderly. However, it was fortunate that the other sects did not want to clash with Zhenling at this time. Once there was any conflict with Zhenling's area, they would immediately retreat far away. Even so, there were still many sects who had begun to move closer to Zhenling, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and slowly formed a loose encirclement around the perimeter. Other than the Zhenling adept, Sung Jian, who had seen the full picture of the underwater volcanoes, no one from the other sects had ever seen the true nature of the underwater volcanoes. Now that they saw Zhenling's arrangement to occupy the sea, they naturally knew that Zhenling was purposely encircling some of the more valuable volcanoes into their own area of influence. The volcanoes that Zhenling had set his sights on in the future might not be as good as Zhenling's volcanoes, but at least they would be much better than their own random encirclement, relying entirely on luck. At this time, two beams of light came rushing over from the sea in the distance. At this time, almost all the Dharma adepts from the various sects had arrived. As the various sects occupied their own areas of influence, they all turned their attention to these two beams of light. The first person turned into a hurricane. When his entire body stopped, a gust of wind blew past, almost causing the crimson poisonous fog that had been suppressed and condensed by the tens of Dharma adepts below his feet to swirl again. Zhenling Liang Tianfeng. At this time, perhaps only Zhenling had the energy to spare to send out a Dharma adept. However, Liang Tianfeng's appearance only caused many of the Laozu present to sigh a little. The Dharma adept behind Liang Tianfeng was the one who once again shocked the entire North Sea Street. Zhenren Xiansun. No, it should be Laozu Tiansun now. After decades of training in seclusion, Zhenren Xiansun, who had also condensed a 7th-grade golden core, had finally broken through the final barrier and become Zhenling's 15th Dharma adept. 15 Dharma adepts. This was a huge force. Even the powerful Fei Ling sect only had 18 Dharma adepts in the past. At that moment, the various Laozu sects in the entire North Sea all had different thoughts. The various sects, which had originally been competitive with each other, all became dispirited. And as these hundreds of pillars of fire turned into thick volcanic ash and began to fall towards the surface of the sea in front of them suddenly welcomed a moment of silence. Just as everyone was wondering what was happening, a low rumbling sound suddenly came from the bottom of the sea. It was as if a monster hidden at the bottom of the sea was about to rush out of the sea. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. The splashes of water became more and more frequent, and the cultivators of the various sects became more and more anxious. At that moment, almost 100 beams of light suddenly lit up from the red fog that covered the entire surface of the sea. It's coming out, it's coming out! Nearly 100 streaks of light suddenly broke through the crimson mist and fled in all directions. Chapter 996. Hundreds of spiritual fires suddenly rushed out from the sea within a radius of 1,000 miles, causing many Dharma adepts to cry out in alarm as they fled in all directions. The North Sea adepts had never seen so many spiritual objects of heaven and earth, and these spiritual fires were the most precious among all spiritual objects. With the spiritual fires suddenly flying around in front of them, some of the weak-willed adepts were even stunned for a moment. Other than a few Dharma adepts, almost all the other adepts began to fight for these spiritual fires that were flying around randomly. Previously, many of the adepts had their own territories on the sea, with the exception of a few major sects, but the rest could no longer be maintained. Celestial Elephant Laozu and Daosheng Laozu took the lead. Celestial Elephant Laozu suddenly made his move, and in an instant, more than 10 shadows of arms appeared in the sky, and in an instant, 7 spiritual fires were caught in his hands. On the other side, Daosheng Laozu did even more. Similarly, more than 10 mysterious winds were peeled off from his body, and the 8 spiritual fires had already been caught by these small whirlwinds. And then, one by one, they fell into Daosheng Laozu's hands. Following closely behind these two were the 2 Zhenling Laozu and the East Pole Laozu. Tianfan and Tianshui worked together to capture 6 spiritual fires, while the East Pole Laozu also captured 4 spiritual fires. However, when the East Pole Laozu turned to look, he saw that the Zhenling Lu Tianping had also caught 4 spiritual fires. How could this be? The East Pole Laozu's expression quickly turned gloomy. In fact, the moment Lu Ping made his move, the harvest was not much different from the other mid-Dharma adepts, and they were all aiming for 3 spiritual fires. However, at the moment when Lu Ping made his move, the avatar Lu Xiaoping, who was holding Lu Ping's aqua sword, also made his move, snatching a spiritual fire back before a Linggu sect adept could. The rest of the mid-Dharma adepts had only managed to get 2 or 3 flames. Some of the more unlucky ones had only managed to get 1. However, the adepts at the mid-Dharma stage and above had basically all managed to get their hands on something, and there were no signs of them returning empty-handed. In an instant, almost 100 kindling seeds were divided up by the dozens of Dharma adepts. Zhenling used the advantage of his position and the fact that he had the most number of Dharma adepts. In one fell swoop, he obtained 23 kindling seeds, which was about a quarter of the total number of spiritual fires. Everyone had at least 1 kindling. Next was the alliance of Xianling sect and Water Crystal Palace, who had obtained more than 10 spirit fires in one go. The Blue Sea sect had obtained close to 10. These 3 forces alone had split close to half of the spirit fires that had flown out of the sea. Then, they heard the loud sound of waves behind them. When they turned around, they saw that the East Pole Laozu and Daoshen Laozu had joined forces to attack Tianfan and Tianshui. Lu Ping was wearing the Cloud Glow 5 Elements robe. Using the volcanic dust as a cover, he sneaked all the way to the vicinity. He did not dare to use his divine will to investigate, so he could only use the 3 pure true eyes to look in the direction where Tian Xiang and Dao Sheng were fighting. Chapter 997. As a whole, the mother and son flames could be considered to be a mid-grade heaven rank spirit treasure, but under certain conditions, it could only be considered to be a low-grade heaven rank spirit treasure. The difference between them was the profundities of the mother and son flames. The mother-child earth fire could split. Once the earth fire as a whole began to split, the grade of the earth fire as the parent body would drop to the heaven rank lower grade. Similarly, 3 earth rank upper grade second generation spiritual fires would appear. However, the splitting of the mother and child earth fire did not stop there. The 3 earth rank upper grade second generation fire would continue to split. Each child fire would split into 3 mystic rank upper grade third generation fire. In this way, there would be 9 mystic rank upper grade third generation fire. At the same time, the 3 earth rank upper grade second generation fire would drop to earth rank middle grade after splitting. The reason why this mother and child core fire, which had yet to split apart, was worth the 2 Dharma adepts fighting over was not only because of the quality of the fire, but also because it could be used to practice a powerful fire-based spell formation that had been passed down in the world of practitioners for a long time, but was rarely mastered. Inferno burning the heavens. There were a total of 13 child mother core fires after they were split, and there was an extremely mysterious connection between them. There was once a formation master in the world of cultivation who was inspired by this and spent more than 100 years to create this inferno sky burning inferno formation. Once it was put to use, it displayed a great deal of power. This formation master, who was only at the early Dharma stage, was able to trap and kill a late Dharma stage great practitioner, causing the inferno sky burning inferno formation to shake the world of cultivation. After that, although the heaven burning inferno formation rarely appeared in the cultivation world, it was only because the mother-child geocentric fire was rarely found in the cultivation world. However, the cultivation inheritance of the heaven burning inferno formation was not lost. Zhenling was in the Yingtian dojo, and Xianling sect was in the Yingtian dojo, because they once had a foundation that far surpassed Zhenling's. The battle between Celestial Phenomenon Laozu and Daosheng Laozu naturally attracted the attention of many cultivators. However, under the obstruction of the thick volcanic ash and the violent eruption of magma, few people dared to come over and watched the battle between the two supreme cultivators. Right now, Daosheng Laozu had already gained a slight advantage. Celestial phenomenon Laozu stretched his hands out as a formless energy gushed forth from all directions, coiling around the spiritual fire in the air. However, since Lu Ping dared to be the fisherman in the battle between the two Grand Realm cultivators, he was naturally prepared for this. Lu Ping suppressed the mother and child core fire in his hand with one hand, and suddenly pressed down with the other. Similarly, a hidden force slammed down from above. This hidden force was like waves crashing down one after another. However, the hidden force that erupted from above was like countless scattered torrents, completely disintegrating the surging force of Lu Ping, and then continued to hit Lu Ping's body. Lu Ping's body did a somersault in midair, and a cloud sail appeared, wrapping around Lu Ping's body. Several hidden forces hit the cloud sail. The countless auspicious clouds that surged on the surface of the cloud sail were all dispersed, revealing the weapon spirit, the golden-winged roc, who was hiding behind the cloud sail. The golden-winged roc let out a startled cry and flapped its wings. Auspicious clouds once again gathered around its body, and at the same time, the cloud sail began to fold up, using its body to withstand the hidden forces of the two Dharma adepts. However, Lu Ping himself was still sent flying by the hidden forces in midair, crashing into 3 pillars of fire. However, the cloud sail was, after all, a spirit-grade protective treasure, and its protective magic power had already been successfully condensed. Although Lu Ping was hit by the hidden forces to the point of vomiting, he still managed to withstand it. The surrounding cultivators who were secretly observing the battle between the two Laozu all gasped. Daosheng Laozu looked coldly at Lu Ping in the distance, and his figure retreated. At the same time, a cloud of volcanic ash came, covering Daosheng Laozu's figure. When the volcanic ash dissipated, Daosheng Laozu had already retreated and disappeared. In the distance, Lu Ping finally managed to stop. When he returned, he would inevitably be reprimanded by Celestial Phenomenon Laozu, and the mother and child core fire was also handed over to Celestial Phenomenon Laozu. Although the mother and child core fire was very powerful, it was not particularly suitable for pill concoction or artifact forging. It also did not possess the magical effect of burning divine sense, like the jade phosphorus soul fire. Although it could be used to set up the Inferno Purgatory Sky Incineration Array, it was not suitable for cultivators like Lu Ping, who cultivated water-type cultivation techniques. As time went on, more and more volcanoes broke through the surface of the ocean. However, the number of volcanoes that were still erupting was gradually decreasing. A thick layer of crimson fog covered the surface of the ocean, and the silhouette of a massive island gradually took shape on the surface of the ocean. Lu Ping hovered high up in the sky, while Lu Qiner hovered around Lu Ping, never leaving Lu Ping's line of sight. The volcanic ash in the sky had already gradually dissipated under the various methods of the Laozu of various sections. The dull roar from the bottom of the sea was still ringing, and the earthquake was still ongoing. However, the eruption of the volcano had gradually stopped. A thick layer of red fog that covered the surface of the sea had also spread over the entire giant island that had appeared on the surface of the sea along with the rise of the volcanoes. The fog had also spread over the entire island, and this thick fog no longer evaporated, but because of the expansion, it became a little lighter. The giant island that was covered with volcanoes finally appeared on the surface of the sea. Chapter 998. The eruption of the volcanoes gradually came to a stop as the huge island rose from the bottom of the sea. However, the magma at the crater was still boiling, and thick smoke billowed into the sky, shrouding the entire island in a layer of gray fog. Everyone knew that there might be a large number of heaven and earth spirit fires hidden in this huge volcanic cluster, but Laozu did not have the time or energy to find out exactly where they were. He could not wait here for them to come out, so the rest of the task of exploring this island was left to the other Earth Stage adepts in the sect. At this time, the cultivators of the various sects finally realized that the 10 Dharma adepts of Jinling had already occupied an area of a few hundred miles from the coast of the huge volcanic cluster to the inside of the island. They had roughly occupied about 1/5 of the area of the huge volcanic cluster. And this area was the area where the volcanoes were the most densely distributed. When the cultivators of the various sects saw this, their teeth itched with hatred, but there was nothing they could do. Not to mention the fact that Jimling had a general understanding of the underwater volcanic cluster in advance. Just the strength displayed by the large number of Dharma adepts was enough to make the various sects hesitate to take action. However, before the various sects cultivators could secretly think of all kinds of strange ideas, there were already more than 10 rays of light in the sky flying towards the huge volcanic cluster. The cultivators of the various sects swept out with their divine senses, and a moment later, all kinds of complicated expressions appeared on their faces. After receiving the news that the volcanic cluster in the Northwest Sea was gradually calming down, Zhenling's fire-based adepts, as well as those who were not fire-based adepts but were alchemists and craftsmen, had already set out on Floating Island, just in time to arrive at the scene. If it was said that Zhenling's few Laozu had first occupied the most important part of this vast giant island, now that these disciples had arrived in time, they had actually occupied it. The cultivators of the various sects had no choice but to admit it. Lu Ping jumped out and stopped the dozens of Zhenling adepts who were about to enter the volcanic cluster, saying, "The giant volcanic cluster is filled with a poisonous fog condensed by the fire poison, which has a subtle impact on the cultivator's inner yuan. If you stay here for too long, I'm afraid it will be detrimental to your future cultivation. This fire poison is extremely difficult to deal with, but I have a kind of poisonous fire here that can restrain the poisonous fog in the volcanic cluster. If you think you are not prepared, you can take a poisonous fire from me to avoid the poison. When you return from the volcanic cluster, you can just exchange the fire." A poison that could make even an alchemist feel difficult to deal with naturally made the dozens of Zhenling adepts at the core forging stage feel uneasy. Seeing Lu Ping hold a jet-black flame in his hand, and then with a slight shake, dozens of sparks splashed out from the flame and turned back into small flames. Many of the adepts stepped forward to take a small flame and hang it in front of them. After that, they began to occupy the area that Laozu had marked out. After the cultivators from Zhenling's sect fell into the volcanic region, the scarlet-red poisonous mist converged upon the poisonous flame on each cultivator's waist. Gradually, an area free of the poisonous mist was formed around each cultivator. At the same time, the bean-sized flame on each cultivator's waist flickered. It appeared to have become even more active. Seeing that the Zhenling adepts were so busy, Zhenling's excited cheers came from the island from time to time. It seemed that the cultivation resources on this island were so abundant that everyone bowed to them. This made Laozu both excited and envious. They were excited because Zhenling's abundant cultivation resources would once again usher in a great increase after the large spirit stone mine on Frost Island. They were envious because Zhenling was always able to get ahead of the other sections. Although the Laozu of the various sects had roughly divided up the entire volcanic cluster, the boundaries between them were not clear. This gave the adepts under Zhenling the leeway to take advantage of the opportunity to expand their own territory. As for the other sects that bordered Zhenling, Laozu could not say anything. Just as Zhenling had begun to delineate the boundaries of this virgin land, set up formations, explore the terrain, and check out the various rare treasures hidden within the volcanic cluster, the cultivators from the other sects finally arrived. Under Laozu's reminder, the scarlet poisonous fog that permeated the volcanic island also attracted the attention of the cultivators from the various sections. The cultivators from the various sects were also prepared for this. Almost all of them carried poison-dispelling pills, antidotes, and the like. However, these cultivators clearly did not have a deep understanding of the poisonous fog like Lu Ping. Not long after they confidently charged into the volcanic cluster, some cultivators with low cultivation bases ran out in panic. There were also some whose bodies were burning hot. Clearly, they had been poisoned by the fire poison. Soon after, some mid and late core forging cultivators with decent cultivation bases gradually could not withstand the corrosion of the scarlet poisonous fog and retreated one after another. In less than 2 hours, Nearly 100 cultivators from the various sects who had arrived earlier had all retreated from the volcanic cluster. Many of them had their inner yuan eroded by the fire poison. After receiving the Black Prism poison fire seed from Lu Ping, they entered Scarlet Mist Island once again. Jinling's territory on the island had increased from less than 1/5 of the original area to more than 1/5 of the original area. The various sects Laozu began to evacuate one after another. Jinling left behind 2 Laozu, Tiancheng and Tianqin, to guard Scarlet Mist Island. At the same time, he commanded the disciples to continue developing the island. As for Tianfeng Laozu, he returned to Central Plains. Laozu, who had just condensed his Dharma idol not long ago, returned to Celestial Spirit Mountain to continue his cultivation in seclusion. Lu Ping left the Black Prism poison fire for Tianqin Laozu to use temporarily. At the same time, it was also to make it convenient for the disciples on the island to hand over the saturated fire seed. After the Black Prism poison fire had absorbed and neutralized the poison within, it would split into a new fire seed for the disciples to take away. At the same time, Tianqin Laozu also had to study the scarlet fire poison on Scarlet Mist Island and concoct a poison-repellent pill that could adapt to Scarlet Mist Island. As for Tiancheng Laozu, he had obtained the mother-child geocentric fire and was preparing to concoct the heaven-burning hellfire array. If he could successfully concoct this array, with Tiancheng's abilities, its power would be even greater than a supreme magic. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. On this day, Lu Ping was giving a lecture to the disciples on Huangli Island. With the eldest disciple Wang Xuanqi as the leader, Tian Xianyue, Du Xianluo, Fang Xianwei, Fang Xuanxia, and Zheng Xuanwu, the 6 personal disciples, and several disciples were sitting in order. Just as they were listening to the impromptu lecture, Lu Ping suddenly stopped talking. All the disciples were confused. As the eldest disciple, Wang Xuanqi was about to open his mouth to ask, but he heard Lu Ping say, "Let's stop here for today. Your martial uncle Lei Delay has already condensed the Dharma idol. Remember to go and congratulate him after the lecture ends." After saying that, Lu Ping's figure had already disappeared from the cave residence. In a secret underground room on Huangli Island that was opened up by Debao, a branch of the Huangli Island spirit vein opened up and led directly to this place. An unparalleled aura crashed against the seal formation in the secret room. However, the waves of aura and spiritual qi that rushed up were all blocked by the seal formation in the secret room. Instead, the secret room accumulated a dense amount of spiritual qi, almost to the point of squeezing out water. 6th brother Lei, who was sitting cross-legged in the secret room, seemed to have sensed something. He began to restrain the aura on his body as much as possible. However, he had just broken through to the next level of cultivation, so he could not completely control the situation of his body. This caused the aura around him to become extremely unstable. A space door gradually formed, and Lu Ping slowly walked out of the door. He smiled and said, "Congratulations, Brother Lei, for finally achieving the Dharma idol." 6th brother Lei smiled faintly and said, "I originally advanced to the peak of the core forging realm before you did. It took me nearly 100 years to advance to the Dharma idol. However, whether it is in terms of cultivation or strength, you have already left me far behind. What is there to celebrate?" 6th brother Lei stood up and stretched his arms and legs. Then he looked around and said, "Your wife's method of setting up the formation is getting better and better. The seal formation in this secret room cannot be broken even with the power of the aura that I gathered when I condensed the Dharma idol." Lu Ping was about to say something, but he paused for a moment. He stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion in front of him. A space door was torn open by Lu Ping, and a message jade slip was taken out by Lu Ping. The jade slip only contained a message from Jiang Tianlin Laozu. "Zhang Shi has arrived in the East Sea." Zhang Shi had been hot-headed in the Northwest Sea and failed to plot against the leader of Jinling Lu Tianling. Instead, Jinling had something on him. At that time, Zhang Shi also knew that he had gotten into big trouble, so he did not participate in the rise of Scarlet Mist Island, causing Song Haisek's strength to suffer a great loss. In the end, the area of influence they had on Scarlet Mist Island was even smaller than that of Xianling sect. After the incident, the Zhenling sect began to brazenly suppress the Blue Sea sect in all aspects throughout the entire North Sea. This was especially so after the great elder of the East Pole sect on Scarlet Mist Island, who was still at the mid-Dharma stage. As expected, the various sects in the North Sea chose to stand by and watch. At least on the surface, they all condemned Zhang Shi's actions. Zhenling's suppression of Songhai sect started with the dispute over the Spirit Stone mine on Frost Island. After Zhenling successfully suppressed Songhai sect's share, the two Laozu Tianfan and Tian Shui returned to Frost Island. In the following Spirit Stone distribution, although Songhai sect's share was not forcibly taken by Zhenling, half of the supreme-grade Spirit Stones were forcibly replaced by high-grade Spirit Stones by Zhenling. Dong Kuan Laozu, who was stationed on Frost Island, was no match for the Wind and Snow Immortals, and had no choice but to suffer this loss. After that, Lu Ping personally oversaw the distribution of the precious mid-sized Spirit Stone mine in the Northwest Sea. Together with Tian Feng, Tian Shan and Tian Sun, they defeated Songhai sect's Dong Yi Dong Yin, and Dong Hu sect's Dong Hai sect's Dong Yi Dong Yin, and Dong Hu sect's Dong Hai 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 sect's Dong. After that, someone found traces of Zhang Shi in the Southeast Sea region. Lu Ping personally went to chase after him, but Zhang Shi fled at the sight of him, and Lu Ping returned empty-handed. On Scarlet Mist Island, Zhenling's cultivators attacked Songhai sect's territory several times. Most of the time, Zhenling's cultivators robbed the other's spirit materials, destroyed the other's mines, formations and mining puppets, and even triggered the volcanoes in their territory in advance. Although they did not cause the deaths of Songhai sect's cultivators, they caused great losses to Songhai sect. Naturally, the Songhai sect was not willing to be outdone. Although they were in the wrong in the sneak attack on Lu Tianling, they still fought back as much as they could against Zhenling's all-round suppression. Unfortunately, Zhenling had already expected this. In the face of the Songhai sect's counterattack, Zhenling's defenses were tight. After several battles, not only did the Songhai sect not gain much of an advantage, they also lost a lot of people, and the momentum of their counterattack was weakened once again. Of course, Zhenling's strength would also cause some sects in the North Sea to have other thoughts in their hearts. Although they did not help either side on the surface, they secretly provided convenience. At the very least, they had to let the Songhai sect persevere under Zhenling's suppression. Only then could they achieve the goal of mutual destruction. Although the Songhai sect also knew the intentions of these forces that secretly supported them, they had no choice but to swallow this bitter fruit at this time. In order to exchange for the secret support of these forces, the Songhai sect gave up countless benefits and sold a lot of inheritance that originally belonged to them. At this time, Jiang Tianlin, who was far away in the East Sea, heard the news of Lu Tianling's attack after attending the Fantasy Spirit City's auction. He quickly rushed back to the North Sea with Xiang Lu Laozu, leaving only Tiankong Laozu to guard Jingzha Island. Jiang Tianlin, who returned to the North Sea, didn't have time to report to the sect what he had gained in the East Sea. The first thing he did was take over the command of the Dark Hall from Lu Tianling, and began to search for traces of Zhang Shi in the entire North Sea. Under Jiang Tianlin's command, the entire Dark Hall began to operate at an astonishing speed. Furthermore, it displayed a power that far surpassed what it had displayed in the past, when it was under Li Xianin and Lu Tianling's control. It was as if they were peeling silk from strands, and once again they found traces of Zhang Shi. This time, Jiang Tianlin personally took action, and very quickly found Zhang Shi, who was hiding in the northeastern sea near the Deep Sea Demon region. Before meeting Lu Ping, Zhang Shi's only opponent in the entire North Sea was Jiang Tianlin. After advancing to the mid-Dharma stage and mastering supreme powers, Zhang Shi's greatest hope was to be able to fight Jiang Tianlin in a fair and square battle. Unexpectedly, Lu Ping appeared out of nowhere and beat him up before Jiang Tianlin could even make a move. In the end, Zhang Xi was forced to retreat and run away. But in the depths of Zhang Xi's heart, he still hoped to fight Jiang Tianlin. Perhaps this had become the only hope to maintain the pride in his heart. However, reality was cruel. Both sides could be said to be enemies, and the battle lasted for several hours. In the end, restless vast ocean was defeated by fallen petals in profusion. Although Zhang Xi wasn't injured, Jiang Tianlin forcefully took away 18 years of his lifespan, which was even more chilling than being injured. Zhang Xi had no choice but to flee again. Jiang Tianlin chased after him. The two of them ran and chased for 2 whole years. From the northeastern sea to the deep sea demon region, they were chased out by the primordial crocodile clan's great practitioner, Ao Xian. Then, they entered the southeastern sea and fought again on Huanyu Island. When they reappeared, they were already in the southwestern sea. Along the stormy ocean, they fought all the way to the vicinity of Frost Island. Then they went to the northern stormy ocean. The two of them fought 6 times along the way, and Zhang Xi lost every time. In total, he had lost 100 years of his life to Jiang Tianlin. All the Dharma adepts of the North Sea, who had been watching this battle, were so shocked that their teeth hurt. A lifespan of 100 years, Zhang Xi had only cultivated for a little over 600 years. Even if he was at the mid-Dharma stage and had a lifespan of 1,200 years, he was only left with a little over 500 years. Now, Jiang Tianlin had shaved away 1/5 of his lifespan. This great technique of fallen petals could really kill people without spilling blood. It was at this moment that the pursuit between the two of them that shook the entire cultivation world of the North Sea had to stop. Back then, the Azura that had been chased away by the 5 great cultivators of the North Sea had suddenly led a large army of Azura demons out of the ocean of storms. This time not only Zhang Xi, even Jiang Tianlin had to flee. In a short year, the northwestern sea, except for Scarlet Mist Island, had fallen into the hands of Mara. The fire is extremely pure, Lu Qiner said embarrassedly. Qiner has mistaken. After all, the fire spirit pearl is even rarer than the spirit amassing pearl. Qiner only described it in my inherited memories. However, without our Phoenix race's bloodline inheritance secret art, it wouldn't be easy to nurture this fire vein. Lu Ping knew that Lu Qiner was speaking the truth. The Fire Phoenix race was publicly acknowledged as the elves of fire in the cultivation world. Although Lu Qiner didn't have a pure Fire Phoenix bloodline, her cultivation might not be inferior to the direct descendants of the Fire Phoenix race. Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "Qiner, I might be going to the East Sea soon. Do you want to follow me?" Lu Qiner looked at the fire vein in the middle of the kernel. This was the new home that she had painstakingly built for herself. For this, she had pursued Debao on Huangli Island for an entire year. Only then did she obtain enough treasures to execute the Fire Phoenix's secret art and nurture the Fire Spirit Pearl into a fire vein. However, Lu Qiner also knew that Lu Ping might bring her to the Fire Phoenix race on this trip to the North Sea. This was an opportunity for her, and it was related to the growth of her cultivation. Lu Qiner naturally didn't want to miss it. "Wherever Big Brother goes, I will go." Lu Ping smiled and said, "You stay here for a period of time first. There's no hurry to go now." Ignoring Lu Qiner's cheers, Lu Ping turned around and returned to his cave abode, entering his secret cultivation room. Right now, the spirit vein on Huangli Island was converging into the 3rd mid-sized spirit vein. The spiritual energy in Lu Ping's cultivation room was so dense that it could choke an ordinary person to death. In the underground spring where the spiritual energy originated from, Lu Dagui was sleeping in the water. In this spirit pond that Lu Dagui created, 18 willing fish Dao soldiers had already advanced into the blood condensation realm. Some of the more outstanding ones had even advanced into the mid-stage of the blood condensation realm. There were 36 willing fish of the 2nd generation that had survived, and they were now at the late stage of the blood refining realm. The 81 willing fish of the 3rd generation had only just reached the blood refining realm, and were not qualified to become Dao soldiers yet. These willing fish were a gift from the Tianxian sect to Lu Ping when he was traveling in the Middle Earth. The willing fish was one of the strongest Dao soldiers in the cultivation world, but it was also one of the most difficult to cultivate. After decades of cultivation, even though Lu Ping was rich, he only managed to cultivate 3 generations of willing fish, and there were only slightly more than 100 of them. Most of the time, these Dao soldiers were taken care of by Lu Dagui. Lu Ping took out a water bowl and sucked it towards the pond. Lu Dagui, the willing fish, and the spiritual water in the pond were all sucked into the water bowl by Lu Ping. The spring gurgled, and the water began to fill up the entire pond again. After leaving the cave abode, Lu Ping once again summoned all his disciples. Looking at the disciples below him, Lu Ping said, "I will be going on a long journey in the near future. This time, it will take at least 3 to 5 years, and at most, it will take several decades. All of you must be careful and diligent. Don't let your cultivation fall behind." The disciples all bowed their heads in agreement. The eldest disciple, Wang Xuanqi, said, "I wonder where Master will be going? We brothers and sisters can accompany you." Lu Ping shook his head and said, "This time, I will be going to the Eastern Sea first. I don't know where I will be going after this. As the eldest disciple of the Hearing Surf Manor, you need to take care of the affairs on Huangli Island on my behalf. The cultivation of you brothers and sisters is still too weak. You will only be a burden if you go." Lu Ping ignored the embarrassment on the disciples' faces and said, "The Northern Sea is currently in troubled times. It is not good for all of you to cultivate diligently. You need to go out often to gain experience. Although it is dangerous, it will be of great benefit to your future cultivation." The disciples all listened attentively. A satisfied smile appeared on Lu Ping's face, and he continued, "Master has a few treasures here that I don't normally use. Today, I will give them all to you. However, don't blindly rely on the power of these treasures to bully others. You must know that your own cultivation is the foundation. Without a deep cultivation, even if you have a treasure, you will only be able to display some of its power." When the disciples heard that Lu Ping wanted to divide the treasures, their faces lit up with joy. Lu Ping's face sank, and he gave them another lecture before handing over a spirit sealing box and the water bowl containing the willing fish to Wang Xuanqi. He said, "Xuanqi, you are my eldest disciple. Currently your cultivation is at the 3rd layer of core forging. The foundation you have accumulated is enough for you to step into the mid-core forging stage. However, the spirit sealing box I am giving you contains a low-grade heaven gold stone." Seeing the awkward expression on Wang Xuanqi's face, Lu Ping smiled and said, "Of course, I'm not asking you to use a heaven-grade origin treasure on your first try. Instead, I hope that you can use this heaven-grade origin treasure on your second try and break through to the late core forging realm." Hearing this, Wang Xuanqi heaved a sigh of relief and said, "I will definitely not disappoint you, Master." Ordinary practitioners who could refine a low-grade heaven gold stone for the 3rd time would already be considered a reserved Dharma adept of the sect, who knew how much effort the sect would put in to cultivate them. However, Lu Ping wanted Wang Xuanqi to use a heaven gold stone for his second attempt. It was obvious that Lu Ping wanted Wang Xuanqi to be nurtured like a disciple of a large, established sect, or even one of the 6 holy lands. Chapter 1001. Lu Ping did not directly prepare the spiritual items for Wang Xuanqi to advance to the mid-stage core forging realm. He hoped that they could obtain it through their own efforts, and not blindly rely on Master's help. At the same time, he placed the heavenly gold stone far in front of him to encourage his disciples. Lu Ping handed the water bowl to Wang Xuanqi and said, "This willing fish is a Dao weapon that Master specially prepared for Huangli Island. It's just that this Dao weapon has not been fully formed yet. Master has no time to spare, so I will temporarily leave this Dao weapon in your care." After handing the heavenly gold stone and willing fish to Wang Xuanqi, Lu Ping looked at Tian Xianyue and said, "I heard that you have made great progress in the Yingshan Immortal Academy. You have already mastered mid-stage core forging realm pills, and are now refining late-stage core forging realm pills?" Tian Xianyue said, It's all thanks to Master's guidance and cultivation. Disciple has concentrated on studying Master's pill refinement techniques to achieve this. Lu Ping nodded and said, I have passed on all my pill refinement techniques to you. However, Master still has 2 great pill refinement techniques. I have already taught you the spiritual explosion technique. So today, I will teach you the spirit fire smelting purification technique. This secret technique is very important, so you must use it carefully. You should study it carefully after you leave. Tian Xianyue took the jade slip and thanked Lu Ping. However, he saw Lu Ping open his palm, and a small pill furnace appeared in Lu Ping's palm. Tian Xuanyue's eyes widened when he saw the pill furnace in Lu Ping's hand. Even the other disciples sucked in a breath of cold air. Top-grade pill furnace, flying rainbow cauldron. Although Jinling already had 2 magic treasure pill furnaces, and the number of high-grade pill furnaces had increased, it did not mean that Jinling had enough pill furnaces. On the contrary, with the expansion of Jinling and the increase in the number of pill refinement masters, both pills and pill furnaces were still in short supply. The status of top-grade pill furnaces in the sect did not decrease but increased. Who would have known that Lu Ping actually had a top-grade alchemy furnace on him? In fact, what everyone didn't know was that Jinling actually had 3 magic treasure pill furnaces. In addition to Lu Ping's Nachuan cauldron and Tian Lu Laozu's treasure cauldron, Jinling had also obtained a treasure cauldron that had condensed 3 treasured seals in the Ying Tian dojo. However, this treasured cauldron was eventually obtained by Celestial Phenomenon Laozu. Even Lu Ping had no idea what Celestial Phenomenon Laozu used it for. Lu Ping noticed the expressions on the disciples' faces. He smiled faintly and said to Tian Xianyue, although I prepared this soaring rainbow cauldron for you, it won't be easy for you to obtain it. However, compared to Wang Qi and Du Jialua, they were far behind. Lu Ping waved his hand in front of him. 2 flying swords appeared from the spatial door like swimming fish. They circled around Lu Ping's body. They were the autumn dew swords in Lu Ping's hand. This pair of spirit-nurturing grade flying swords had accompanied Lu Ping for decades. If it weren't for the fact that the quality of the swords could no longer be improved, Lu Ping would not have stopped using them after obtaining the thin water-flowing sword. Lu Ping thought for a moment. He guided the 2 flying swords slightly and pointed at the stone wall at the entrance of the cave. The autumn dew swords drew a white arc in front of the 2 swords and disappeared into the stone wall. Looking at the confused siblings, Lu Ping said, You 2 have cultivated my sect's joint attack secret technique. The autumn dew eerie swords were once my favorite weapon. Now I've embedded the swords into the stone wall. One day, if you 2 can extract the swords without damaging the stone wall, the swords will belong to you too. The siblings were happy and worried at the same time. They were happy because the charming autumn water sword was a spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasure, which was already considered an important treasure in Jinling sect. But they were worried because Lu Ping had clearly set up a test for them. They didn't expect the siblings to obtain the mystic treasure so easily. It wouldn't be easy to pass the test set up by Immortal Water Sword. However, thinking about the treasures that Lu Ping had left for his 3 direct disciples, it was clear that Lu Ping had placed the treasures in front of the disciples' cultivation. Every time they made some progress, there would be a benefit waiting for them. But if they slacked off, then they would naturally have no chance of obtaining the treasures. In front of the last registered disciple, Sung Wu, Lu Ping took out Landslide and weighed it in his hand with reluctance. This landslide has been with me for the longest time. Although I have managed to condense the 7th restriction and upgrade it to spirit nurturing grade, it is extremely difficult to continue to upgrade it. It is extremely rare to find a top-grade spirit material with both water and gold attributes. However, this treasure is suitable for your cultivation method. If you can successfully advance to the mid-core forging stage in the future, you can take this treasure and refine it. After assigning tasks to the disciples, Lu Ping stood up and went to Tianling Mountain. Originally, he wanted to see if his teacher had recovered, but he did not expect to receive a message from Laozu Jiang Tianlin. As soon as he arrived at Tianling Mountain, he asked if Lu Ping had already set off for the Eastern Sea, and if he had not, he would immediately head to Scarlet Mist Island. Lu Ping was bewildered, but he did not hesitate at all. He turned around and walked toward the teleportation formation in front of the Heaven's Spirit Hall. With a flash of white light, Lu Ping reappeared on Scarlet Mist Island that was shrouded in red mist. Currently Tianlin, Xianglu, Tiancheng, Tianqin, and Tianshan had gathered on Scarlet Mist Island. Other than Tianling Mountain, it could be said that Jinling was the most impregnable place. As soon as Lu Ping emerged from the teleportation formation in front of a mountain, he just happened to see a group of Mara charging toward where Jinling was stationed. The Jinling cultivators on Scarlet Mist Island all rose into the air and began to activate the protective formation along the coast in preparation to defend against the Mara's charge. However, this group of Maras was not particularly strong, but they were extremely fast. It seemed that they wanted to charge into Scarlet Mist Island before the protective formation was completely activated. The cultivators in Jinling cried out in alarm. As soon as the protective formation was activated, it had yet to unleash its full power. However, over 10 large Maras had already arrived. The various magic treasures on their bodies all shot toward the cultivators in Jinling. Just as Lu Ping's soul sense charged toward the group of Maras, a soul sense hidden in the air also charged toward Lu Ping's soul like a hungry wolf. The blood demon's soul-devouring ability? Lu Ping sneered. His divine sense suddenly ignited with oily green flames of nothingness that could only be seen by divine sense. The hidden blood demon sensed something amiss and wanted to retreat. However, how could Lu Ping let this opportunity slip away? His divine sense abruptly charged forward, and a shrill roar suddenly rang out from the void several li away. Next, a blood-red figure flashed across the horizon before disappearing. Lu Ping did not care about it. He knew that every time Mara attacked, there would be a bloody Mara hiding in the void. His appearance would surely attract the attention of the bloody Mara that was lingering outside Scarlet Mist Island. Although Lu Ping would not attack the ordinary Mara, he did not mind making the bloody Mara that was hiding suffer. Just as the blood demon was defeated and fled, Lu Ping's divine sense immediately sensed that 2 bloody Mara-level divine senses were once again paying attention to him. However, this time, the other party was clearly more cautious. They were only monitoring him to see if he would attack the ordinary Mara that was attacking Scarlet Mist Island. Naturally, Lu Ping would not break the unwritten rule between the cultivation world and Mara. However, just because he did not attack, it did not mean that Lu Ping would not interfere. A young man, who was slightly shorter than Lu Ping, but several times more muscular than Lu Ping, walked out from behind Lu Ping with a bronze bell in his hand. Chapter 1002. Although De Bao still had the face of a young man, the 2 small tufts of mustache below his nose made him look a little more mature. In addition, he had managed the Huangli Island auction house and other businesses over the past few years, causing De Bao to look a little more mature. De Bao held a copper bell in his hand, walked a few steps towards the battle on the sea, and then suddenly hit the big bell in his hand. Duong! A ripple visible to the naked eye extended in the void, and in a moment, it had spread to the battle between the Jinling cultivators and Mara cultivators. The Jinling cultivators only felt pain in their eardrums, followed by dizziness, and immediately woke up. On the other hand, the Mara cultivators on the opposite side covered their ears and cried out in pain. Many of the weaker Mara cultivators were dispersed by the sound of the bell, and fell from the sky one after another. They were surrounded and killed by the Jinling cultivators who woke up before them. In just a moment, the situation of the whole battle suddenly reversed. A large number of Mara fell, and the remaining big Mara cultivators with deeper cultivation were mostly able to resist the sound of the bell. Although they were dazed for a moment, they quickly recovered. Even so, because a large number of Mara cultivators with weaker cultivation were killed, the Jinling cultivators had a numerical advantage against the remaining big Mara cultivators. They quickly gained the upper hand on the battlefield. After killing 3 or 4 big Mara cultivators in a row, the remaining Mara cultivators could no longer resist the pressure of Jinling cultivators, and they all fled to the sea. When the Jinling cultivators returned to Scarlet Mist Island, Lu Ping had already arrived at the temporary cave residence that Jiang Tianlin and Laozu had opened on Scarlet Mist Island. You got the method to refine the Songhai Bell? When Jiang Tianlin and Laozu saw Lu Ping asking, Xiang Lu and Laozu also looked at the copper bell in Lu Ping's hand in surprise. It was obviously a newly upgraded spiritual magic treasure. Lu Ping was not surprised at all. He handed the copper bell to Jiang Tianlin and said, Yes, I found a jade slip in the Songhai relic. I wasn't sure at first, but after asking senior brother Xian Lian for help, I didn't expect the copper bell to have the same effect as the Songhai bell. It's just that the grade of the copper bell is too low, and to continue to improve the quality of the Songhai bell, the spiritual materials needed are extremely rare and strange. It's not realistic to refine this magic treasure on a large scale to defend against Mara. Jiang Tianlin and Laozu passed the copper bell to Xiang Lu, Tiancheng and the other Laozu. Finally, they returned the copper bell to Lu Ping. Jiang Tianlin and Laozu said, So Xian Lian has already mastered the method to refine the Songhai bell. Although the natal poison of the green sea snakes was the best in the world, Lu Ping's Myriad Poison Meteorite Power Gang and Myriad Poison Serum were known as the mother of all poisons in the world. Moreover, Chu Hailan did not kill these disciples. These disciples more or less carried the flames of the dark prism poisonous fire, which could resist the snake poison in their bodies. Therefore, although everyone had lost their fighting power, their lives were not in danger. Although Mei Tianqin had developed an elixir that could prevent the fire poison from eroding, this elixir could only last for a period of time. In the process of refining this elixir, a lot of spiritual herbs would inevitably be consumed. Therefore, it was not as convenient as the dark prism poisonous fire. Lu Ping easily resolved the snake poison in everyone's body. The disciples thanked him one after another, which made Lu Ping's prestige rise to a higher level. On the outermost volcano of Jinling's sphere of influence on Scarlet Mist Island, Lu Ping suddenly appeared and looked at the layers of ripples in the magma crater. Come out, Lu Ping said coldly. Hehe, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Hailan's seductive voice suddenly came from the tumbling magma. A stream of magma soared into the sky and rushed towards Lu Ping's face. Lu Ping's expression remained unchanged. The magma had already cooled down before it reached Lu Ping. It turned into volcanic ash and rustled down. From beginning to end, Lu Ping did not make a move. A hundreds of feet long fiery serpent soared out of the magma, its crimson scales sparkling under the sunlight, looking like rubies embedded in its body. The fire snake suddenly turned into a ball of flame, and a seductive woman slowly emerged from the flame. It was the Dharma adept of the green sea snakes, Chu Hailan, whom Lu Ping had met in the Tianxian sect. The North Sea Water Sword Sage's reputation has not only shaken the human training world, but is also well known among the demon clans of the major training worlds. I didn't have much time to spar with Lu Daoyu during the last meeting in Middle-earth, but now I don't even have the right to fight. Chu Hailan smiled and exuded the charm of a mature woman. Looking at the magma pool at the mouth of the volcano behind her, she said with some reluctance, This Scarlet Mist Island is indeed a good place. Bathing in it makes one's entire body feel refreshed. Even the volcanic island, where the Fire Phoenix clan resides, is nothing compared to this. No wonder even the Fire Phoenix clan has taken notice of this Scarlet Mist Island in the East Sea. Upon hearing this, Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. This was an important piece of news. Although the Fire Phoenix clan could not be compared to the Green Sea Snakes, they were still the second largest demon clan in the East Sea. Their strength was not inferior to those large sects with a long history in Middle-earth. If the Fire Phoenix clan had really taken a liking to this Scarlet Mist Island, there would be another storm. He had to inform the sect about this, so that they could make early preparations. Lu Ping frowned and said, Fellow Chu, there is a difference between humans and demons. You wouldn't have come this time just to compliment me, right? Seeing the impatient look on Lu Ping's face, Chu Hailan no longer teased him. Her expression became serious, and her seductive charm was swept away. Instead, she had a dignified and graceful aura. She said, This time, I need Lu Daoyu's help. Now that the road to the East Sea has been blocked by the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect, All the sects in the North Sea will not provoke the Crystal Palace. If AI Clan's little sister and I want to return to the East Sea, we can only ask for help from Lu Daoyu. Lu Ping sneered and said, "What a joke. Other sects can't provoke the Crystal Palace, but can our sect? No matter if it's the Heavenly Moon sect or the Green Sea Snakes, they are all famous forces in the cultivation world. You can wait for these two sects to come to rescue you." Chu Hailan said helplessly, "Since that's the case, I can only wait for the cultivators of my clan to come to rescue me on this Scarlet Mist Island." Lu Ping's gaze towards Chu Hailan suddenly shrank. He said, "You dare to threaten me?" If the Crystal Palace and Xianling sect knew that Chu Hailan was hiding on the Scarlet Mist Island, then Jinling would definitely not be able to escape responsibility. Hearing Chu Hailan say this, Lu Ping was naturally furious. Chu Hailan was stimulated by Lu Ping's murderous aura. She was secretly shocked by Lu Ping's tyrannical strength. Even when she faced Wu Shihuan in the past, he did not give her such great pressure. Could it be that the person in front of her was even more powerful than Wu Shihuan? Although Chu Hailan was afraid in her heart, she still resisted. "If I really want to threaten you, I can use the Samling as an excuse. Now that the entire North Sea is searching for the AI family's sister and me, and your Jinling is rising so strongly, you will definitely become a thorn in the side of the Crystal Palace. Don't you think that this is a chance to secretly form an alliance with the Green Sea Snakes and the Heavenly Moon sect? Moreover, the Samling will eventually return to the clan to receive the inheritance of the clan. If you help me, I will help you." Chapter 1003. So your husband was killed by Huang Shijun and others who ambushed him after he was defeated by Wu Shihuan. That's right. Chu Hailan's expression did not change in the slightest as she said, "Although my husband fled in defeat, that Wu Shihuan might not have had it easy either. It's just that I didn't think that the mighty direct lineage cultivator of the Crystal Palace would be so despicable, actually setting up an ambush along the way. That husband of mine was already heavily injured in the first place. So how could he have withstood Huang Shijun's ambush? In the end he still perished. Instead, Huang Shijun became famous after he single-handedly slew my husband." Lu Ping saw that Chu Hailan had chased him from the East Sea to the Central region, and then to the North Sea. It could be seen that the relationship between the couple was very deep. However, Lu Ping couldn't feel the grief of her husband's death from Chu Hailan. From the beginning to the end, Chu Hailan told Lu Ping the process, as if it was an unrelated story. Although Lu Ping was full of doubts, it was not appropriate for him to ask, so he inevitably showed his doubts on his face. Chu Hailan was so smart that she had already understood what Lu Ping was thinking. She said, "Do you feel that I'm very indifferent to my husband's death, but chasing him for thousands of miles seems contradictory?" Lu Ping felt embarrassed that Chu Hailan had seen through his thoughts. However, what he was doing now was like walking on the edge of a bottomless abyss, so he couldn't afford to be careless. So although he seemed hesitant, he still nodded. A trace of worry appeared on Chu Hailan's face as she said, "There's nothing I can do about it. My husband and I aren't actually married. Furthermore, our marriage was decided by our elders. I've only met my husband 3 to 5 times, so how could we have feelings for each other?" Lu Ping asked curiously, "In that case, why are you so eager to avenge him?" Chu Hailan smiled bitterly. "It all started because of me. When I was traveling in human form, Wu Shihuan came to pester me because he coveted my beauty. He chased me all the way to the outer endless sea. I was no match for Wu Shihuan, so I could only use my clan's secret technique to ask for help. Coincidentally, my fiancé came looking for me, and we fought a great battle when we met. However, I didn't expect that my transformation technique, which I thought was brilliant, would be seen through by Wu Shihuan. He set up a trap to lure my husband here. After I was entangled by Ma Shifang, my husband was defeated by Wu Shihuan, and he was killed by Huang Shijun on the way to escape." Chu Hailan paused and continued, "Ma Shifang's strength was similar to mine. When I saw my husband being defeated, I naturally escaped. Fortunately, Wu Shihuan was also injured, so I was able to escape unscathed. However, when I returned to the clan, I was reprimanded by the water snake clan. They thought that it was because of me that my husband died. My fire snake clan is weak to begin with. When the two clans united by marriage, we also asked for help from the water snake clan. Now things have backfired. I can only use the excuse of avenging my husband to travel for many years, in order to avoid the disputes within the clan. Lu Ping didn't expect Chu Hailan to have such an experience. But to be able to fight Wu Shihuan to such an extent, it seemed like her fiancé's status in the water snake clan wasn't low. Otherwise, the Emerald Sea Spirit Snake clan wouldn't have vented their anger on Chu Hailan because of her fiancé's death. At this time, Lu Ping didn't know what to say, but he was still a little nervous. With Chu Hailan's current situation among the green sea snakes, would she still be able to help Samling obtain the inheritance? Chu Hailan seemed to be able to understand Lu Ping's thoughts. Seeing that Lu Ping didn't speak, she quickly guessed his thoughts again. She asked, "Are you worried about Samling's inheritance?" Lu Ping was a little vulnerable to this woman's intuition, so he could only nod and admit it. Chu Hailan smiled and said, "With the qualifications and strength of these three little guys, you should not be worried about whether they can accept the inheritance, but whether you can bring them out after accepting the inheritance." Lu Ping heard the meaning in Chu Hailan's heart and said in surprise, "Is there really a way?" Chu Hailan nodded and said, "This is also what I admire about you. Samling grew up with you, and you were able to resist the temptation of the green sea snakes. From the beginning to the end, you didn't put any restriction on their divine thoughts, making them your spiritual slaves. Instead, you and Samling are like father and son. This is your biggest opportunity." Lu Ping was delighted and asked quickly, "What do you mean?" "Followers." Chu Hailan explained. At the time when the seventh ancestor opened the sky, the concept of the human and demon races was extremely vague. The seventh ancestor himself might have been a member of the demon race. Later on, even though there were differences between the two races, the relationship between the two races was still equal. Many of the ancient almighty people simply abandoned the concept of race. At that time, the almighty people had many followers. The almighty people of the human race had many followers of the demon race, and the almighty people of the demon race also had many followers of the human race. These followers even became the embryonic form of the human race's sections. At that time, the almighty people treated their followers as equals, without discrimination. However, later on, the human heart became more complex, and the demon heart also became more transparent. Thus, this kind of follower, which was built on trust, changed into a method of slavery that controlled the life and death of the almighty people. At this time, Chu Hailan also knew that she had made a mistake, and she hurriedly retracted her aura. However, her soaring demonic aura could no longer be concealed. Tiankong Laozu, who was originally about to leave the island, turned around and charged towards Chu Hailan. Ji Xianxian stuffed the last top-grade spirit stone into the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet. The wooden bird, which was originally dispirited and unpracticed, glowed brightly. It flapped its wings more nimbly, and its speed instantly doubled. Ji Xuanxuan's heart was bleeding. Ji Xianxian's heart was bleeding. The 3 top-grade spirit stones he had were obtained from Lu Ping after wasting half a kilogram of saliva. He didn't expect that the 3 top-grade spirit stones would be wasted on the short journey from Hearing Waves Island to Jingzha Island. This was not what made Ji Xuanxuan's heart ache the most. What pained him the most was the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet. It should be known that the wings of this wooden bird puppet were made from the branches and leaves that Ji Xianxian had saved from the gray willow tree when he was creating Lu Ping's avatar. Needless to say, it was impossible for it to escape so far under the pursuit of a blood shura. However, this puppet had already reached its limit under Ji Xuanxuan's continuous overloading, and was already on the verge of becoming useless. He could only hope that it could persevere until Jingzha Island. Otherwise, not only would he lose his life, even Soundwaves Island would probably be completely slaughtered. A blood-red light was getting closer and closer behind Ji Xianxian. Ji Xianxian could see the hideous smile on the blood shura's face hidden in the blood-red light. Ji Xianxian had no choice but to release the last spirit snake puppet on him, hoping that it could buy him some time. Jingzhe Island was only a few hundred kilometers away. Explode! Ji Xuanxuan's eyes were bloodshot. Seeing that the spine of the spirit snake puppet, made from a branch of the gray willow tree, could not withstand more than 2 or 3 blows from the blood shura, Ji Xianxian gritted his teeth and detonated the puppet. Boom! The spirit snake puppet exploded, and the spine of the gray willow tree turned into 12 bone spikes that shot towards the blood shura. Ji Xuanxuan's face paled, and a mouthful of blood sprayed onto the back of the puppet bird beneath his feet. Jingzhe Island was finally close, but before Ji Xianxian could reveal the slightest hint of joy, the blood shura suddenly broke through the blockade of the 12 bone spikes and chased after Ji Xianxian a few hundred meters away. The primordial spirit treasure in his hand flew out, turning into a flying wheel that slashed towards Ji Xuanxuan's back. Ji Xianxian was finally saved the moment he was killed by the flywheel. Ji Xianxian, who had narrowly escaped death, couldn't be bothered to feel the slightest bit of joy towards the pair of familiar flying swords. His true essence was on the verge of drying up as he struggled to support the wooden bird puppet beneath his feet, to fiercely flap its wings a few times. Then, the wooden bird puppet swayed and crashed towards the Jingzhe Island. Crash! Before the cultivators on Jingzhe Island could rush over to receive him, the entire wooden bird crashed into the ground at an extremely fast speed, and then fell apart. The cultivators from Jinling who rushed over to receive him were Yao Yong, Du Feng, Xianling, and the others. The few of them had accompanied Yao Yong to participate in the Fantasy Spirit Cities auction. Their original intention was to see if they could find a way to restore Laozu's origin. In the end, although they found nothing, Yao Yong insisted on staying in the Eastern Sea. He still didn't give up hope, so Du Feng and Xianling also stayed here to accompany him. The 3 of them saw Ji Xuanxuan's entire body bounce off the moment the wooden bird landed. Then he rolled on the ground several times without any care for his image. In the end, he lay on the ground and didn't get up. The hearts of Yao Yong and the others sank as they hurriedly rushed over. However, they heard Ji Xianxian groaning as he lay on the ground without a care for his image. It was obvious that he didn't suffer any serious injuries, but because his true essence was exhausted, he was unable to support a protective spell like a barrier. Yao Yong said snappily, "Quickly get up. There are still quite a few 4th-generation disciples on the island. If they were to see our sect's dignified puppet grandmaster lying on the ground without any care for his image, who knows how many disciples would have their eyeballs smashed, especially those female disciples. Among the 16 true spirit inheritances, you Ji Xianxian are known as the most handsome and outstanding. Don't disappoint them." These words were indeed effective. Ji Xianxian couldn't care less about the soreness in his body as he crawled up from the ground. He tidied up his clothes and looked around, only to discover that the startled disciples on the island were all looking up at the battle between Lu Ping and the blood azura that was chasing after him. No one had noticed him. The spirit that Ji Xianxian had just mustered immediately dissipated as he said, "Like I said, there's no place for us to stand out with this guy around. The number 1 in appearance really can't compare to the number 1 in strength." Du Feng saw that Ji Xianxian had fled to the jolting hibernation island in such a sorry state. It was obvious that there was an extremely important matter, but this fellow was rambling about without any proper business. Thus Du Feng said coldly, "Speak." Ji Xianxian was startled by Du Feng's cold shout. Only then did he put away his previous playful expression and said, "The Soundwave Island has been besieged by Mara and is in imminent danger. I originally came here to ask for reinforcements, but it seems that there's no need for that now." As he spoke, Ji Xianxian turned his gaze towards the battle between Lu Ping and the blood azura. Lu Ping's pair of flying swords struck the surface of the flywheel like raindrops. Although the flywheel could display the power of a spiritual treasure in the hands of the blood azura, the combination of the thin water everflow sword could also compete with the spiritual treasure. Moreover, the pair of flying swords were currently in Lu Ping's hands. From the beginning, Lu Ping had used swordsmanship to entangle the blood azura's spiritual treasure. The two flying swords shot out more than 100,000 sword lights. Every 1,296 sword lights condensed into a sword dragon. A total of 100 sword dragons weaved a huge sword net in the sky, trapping the flywheel within. No matter how hard it tried, it was unable to break through the restraints of the sword net. In a moment of desperation, the blood azura wanted to personally tear apart the sword net, but was forced back by the sword chi that shot out from the sword net. Most of the blood azura's abilities were based on the spiritual treasure. Now that the spiritual treasure had been trapped by Lu Ping, the blood azura's own strength was only slightly stronger than an ordinary early Dharma adept. Although Lu Ping had also lost the thin water everflow sword, Lu Ping himself had never admitted that he was a pure swordsman. Lu Ping opened his palm and 5 torrents formed in midair, entangling the blood azura. The blood azura obviously did not expect Lu Ping to be able to use such a powerful magical power so casually after using the magical power of the spiritual treasure that could trap it. At this time, it was obvious that it was panicking, but it still rubbed its hands together, and dozens of golden lights shot out in all directions, cutting through the 5 torrents of Lu Ping. However, once Lu Ping used it, it was often endless. The split torrents suddenly split again, and the sky full of drizzle pierced the body of the blood azura. This blood azura was a gold azura, and a copper-colored light shield suddenly appeared all over its body. Although the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain was a meticulous attack, it could not pierce through this protective light shield. However, what the blood azura did not see was that although the sky full of drizzle could not pierce through its protective spell, when the drizzle fell at its feet, it slowly formed a pool of water. At this time, the blood azura was already a little frightened. It had fought with human Dharma adepts several times, but when it came to early Dharma adepts, it was always successful. Even when it came to mid-Dharma adepts that were difficult to deal with, it was able to escape unscathed. But at this time, the person in front of it, just how many kinds of natural great magical power had he used? The blood azura was a little scared. An instinct made it realize that at this time, it seemed to have fallen into the trap of the person in front of it. When it looked down in a daze, it suddenly saw that the water under its feet did not fall because it was in mid-air. Instead, it accumulated more and more, forming a small lake in the sky. The danger in the blood azura's heart became more and more critical. Rays of Gung-Jin essence dispersed from its body, and the flying wheel trapped in the sword net suddenly shook violently. It attacked in all directions in the sword net, smashing 4 or 5 sword dragons in a row, and almost breaking out of the sword net. However, it was a little too late. Lu Ping raised both palms, and the lake in the sky suddenly rose up with a monstrous wave, crashing down on the blood azura's head with the force of a mountain. Blue waves technique. The blood azura dispelled its own Gung-Jin essence, as if it did not care for its life, trying to split the huge wave in front of it. However, it did not see Lu Ping behind the huge wave. His hands formed a few more spells, and then suddenly pushed. The originally monstrous wave suddenly rose by 30 feet, and the power contained in it was even greater. Pushing waves technique. It was a great spell recorded in the Art of Vast Sea. Although Lu Ping had refined a great spell talisman in the Avatar Cloud, he couldn't upgrade it into a great spell seed to form his natal great spell. Even so, the power of this auxiliary remarkable power was still not to be underestimated. The blood azura could no longer resist the power contained in the huge wave. Its whole body was slapped away by the huge wave, and the Gung-Jin shield on its body was also smashed into pieces. Die! There was a sudden shout. The blood azura who was slapped away did not have time to struggle to get up, and saw a huge light of the axe coming straight down from the sky. The blood azura only had time to let out a miserable howl, and then it stopped abruptly. The mountain-splitting axe came down from above, cutting the blood azura into 2. Tiankong Laozu laughed at Lu Ping and said, "Young Lu, I'm sorry, martial uncle attacked halfway." Lu Ping smiled helplessly, but his expression suddenly changed and he said, "Run." The flywheel trapped in the sword net by Lu Ping suddenly went berserk, and the flywheel, which was originally a foot in size, was now fluctuating in size, appearing extremely unstable. This was a sign that it was about to explode. Old ancestor Tian Kong cursed loudly. He saw that a companion spirit treasure that was in his hands was going to disappear again. But his feet didn't linger in the slightest. He returned to Jingzha Island like a wisp of smoke. He had to prevent the aftermath of the meteor explosion from hurting the cultivators on the island. Lu Ping was even more depressed. He had originally wanted to use the Linglong wine cauldron to see if he could absorb the essence from the blood azura when he killed the blood azura. Although this was a gold azura, and the Gungjin essence could not be used by Lu Ping, it would be good as long as he could leave a few Gungjin pills behind. As for the companion spiritual treasure, the flywheel, Lu Ping was more open-minded. After the fall of the blood azura, it often depended on luck to keep this thing, and this luck would not come 9 out of 10 times. Chapter 1005. The fragments of the exploding flywheel danced in all directions. However, in front of Lu Ping, who had the cloud sail to protect him, the power of the meteor companion spiritual treasure's meteor explosion was really nothing. Moreover, perhaps because Blood Shura's death was too sudden, the flywheel's meteor explosion was not complete. 3 larger fragments shot out in a row. Lu Ping was quick to react. The hundreds of fleeing sword jiaos circled around and retracted the 3 shards. But in the blink of an eye, more than a dozen sword jiaos were sliced into pieces by the 3 shards. Linglong spat out a golden pill. It was condensed from the dissipating golden hepta essence that Linglong had tried her best to collect. Swoosh! A dazzling light shot out from Jingzha Island. Du Feng shot the flying sword in his hand straight into the battlefield. The golden hepta essence that was gradually thinning gradually showed signs of condensing into the flying sword in Du Feng's hand. Lu Ping could clearly sense that this trend was not too obvious with his divine telekinesis. However, the flying sword in Du Feng's hand was quite famous. It was already a spirit-nurturing magic treasure and had extremely high potential for improvement. Lu Ping threw a fragment of the companion spiritual treasure towards Du Feng's flying sword. Du Feng's eyes lit up when he saw the fragment. Although the fragment of the companion spiritual treasure could only be regarded as a type of spiritual material, it could be regarded as an extremely rare and pure top-notch spiritual material in the cultivation world. It was very useful to Du Feng. At this time, Chu Hailan already knew that Tian Kong Laozu's evildoer was not directed at her, but at Blood Shura, who was chasing after Ji Xianxian. However, she was more or less on guard in the sect's territory. Unexpectedly, this kind of vigilance caused her to misjudge the situation. Her cultivation, which was originally concealed by the demon transformation bracelet, was automatically exposed. In the end, she was almost subdued by Tian Kong Laozu. Luckily, Chu Hailan's abilities weren't ordinary, which was why she managed to preserve her life under the attack of the mountain-splitting serpent. After that, she willingly entered the trapping formation of the waking hibernating island. Only then did Patriarch Tian Kong put his heart at ease. This was still the result of her identity as the Jade Sea Spirit Serpent, which made Patriarch Tian Kong rather fearful. Patriarch Tian Kong, who had returned to Jingling Island, heard what Lu Ping said, and only then did he let Chu Hailan out. Chu Hailang immediately said his goodbyes and wanted to leave with Ai Shuyao. However, Lu Ping had already heard the news from Ji Xianxian about Hearing Waves Island. In his anxiety, he wanted to rush over to help. However, Lu Ping also knew that the fallen mystic realm was in a state of unrest at this time, so it was naturally not suitable for forefather Tian Kong to leave Jingzha Island. Thus, Lu Ping turned his gaze to Chu Hailan. What? I'm not going. Chu Hailan shook her head like a rattle drum. She wanted to leave Jingzha Island as soon as possible and rush back to her clan to pass on the news of her contact with the Heavenly Moon sect. Among the human sects, Chu Hailan always had a feeling that her life and death were not in her control. She did not want this feeling to remain with her. How about I owe you a favor? Lu Ping was also a little anxious. He had already received the news from Ji Xianxian. He did not know what had happened on Soundwave Island that attracted 3 Blood Azura and a group of Mara to attack. Ji Xianxian risked his life to ask for help and led one away. However, the remaining two and the hundreds of Mara under their command were enough to flatten the entire Soundwave Island. Really? Chu Halen's face lit up. She knew that it was not easy to return a favor to a person like Lu Ping. Moreover, who could predict Lu Ping's future achievements? Lu Qiner carried Lu Ping and Chu Hailan in the direction of Soundwave Island. In a short distance flight, both Lu Ping and Chu Hailan had dozens of methods to surpass Lu Qiner. However, if it was a long-distance flight, Lu Qiner had a natural advantage as a flying Yao cultivator. From Ji Xuanxuan's words, Mara's sudden attack on Soundwave Island seemed rather strange. However, Soundwave Island had been under the management of Qi Lianying and Yin Xianchu for the past few years. It was possible for them to resist the attack of this group of Mara for a short period of time. Moreover, Yin Xianchu had already pushed his cultivation to the edge of refining a spiritual object for the third time. If it was not for the fact that he had no confidence in refining the 3 Ice River Hearts to achieve a 9th-grade golden core, Yin Xianchu would have long since advanced to the peak of core forging. Even so, with Yin Xuanchu's elusive assassination methods, trying to assassinate a blood Shura was akin to courting death. However, it was not impossible to pin it down. I hope they can hold out until I come to help. Lu Ping was deeply worried. Chu Hailan did not have such thoughts. She had only come to help out because of Lu Ping's favor. The life and death of the people on Soundwave Island had nothing to do with her. Away from Tiankong Laozu's vigilant gaze, Chu Hailan felt relaxed. Instead, she chatted incessantly with the flying Lu Qiner. Outside Soundwave Island, Yin Xianchu was bathed in blood. However, his expression was still cold and solemn, as if the injuries on his body did not belong to him. He held the Taixian thorn in his hand in a reverse grip. Drops of Kuei water essence dripped from the thorn's tip, then evaporated into spiritual energy and dispersed in the air. Dozens of feet away, a blood Shura looked at the transparent hole in its arm in surprise. It did not expect that it would be injured by the human clan's minor repairs. This made it extremely angry, but at the same time, it also made it feel a little more afraid of the person in front of it. Yin Xianchu had been entangled with this blood Shura for more than 4 hours. At this moment he was almost at his limit. Just now, he had almost died in the hands of this blood Shura. If it was not for the fact that his method of concealing his tracks was not low, Yin Xianchu would have died many times over. This guy's companion's spiritual treasure was actually invisible. How could it be the same as Lu Tianping's aqua sword? No, it was even more powerful than the aqua sword. If Yin Xuanchu's attainments in concealment were not low, he would have died many times over. The rumbling from afar made Yin Xianchu feel slightly relieved. At least until now, the other blood Shura had not broken the island's protective formation. Although Qi Lianying's cultivation had just broken through to the 8th layer of the core forging realm, his strength was not weaker than Ji Xuanxuan's. With the island's protective formation, and the group of cultivators on the island, they should be able to resist, but they would not be able to hold on for long. Why hasn't that bastard Ji Xianxian returned yet? He couldn't have been killed by that golden Azura on the way, right? If that's the case, then there's no hope for today's battle. When the time comes, I'll just try my best to rescue Qi Lianying, and the others can only fend for themselves. Speaking of which, the relationship between Qi Lianying and Lu Tianping was unclear. Who knew if there would be any disturbances? Moreover, Qi Lianying herself was very strange. Her appearance had been changed, and her memory was also fragmented. However, her cultivation was closely related to Jinling's direct disciple. It was said that she had been raised by Uncle Master Tianqin since she was young, but she had not become Uncle Master Tianqin's disciple. In that case, Uncle Master Tianqin would definitely not break the sex rules and teach her a direct disciple method. Yin Xianchu was suddenly shocked. How could he be distracted at such a moment of life and death? When he looked at the blood Shura in front of him, he saw that the blood Shura was also looking at Yin Xianchu and smiling coldly. The wound on his arm was still dripping with the blood of the blood Shura, but it was no longer the essence of Kuei water, but ordinary water. Not good. Why did this fellow's supernatural power look like the art of deceiving the heavens and sea. Yin Xuanqu's intuition, trained from walking on the edge of life and death, told him that he was now at the moment of life and death. Yin Xuanqu turned to the side and blocked with the Taixian thorn in his hand. With a crisp clang, the Taixian thorn that had just been repaired was cut open by the blood Shura's invisible spiritual treasure. Yin Xuanqu did not care about the pain. This Taixian thorn was something that Lu Ping had entrusted to him to hand over to Qi Lianying. It was only because of the critical situation that Yin Xuanqu had to restrain the blood Shura alone that Qi Lianying had temporarily given him the Taixian thorn. Although Yin Xuanqu had blocked the blood Shura's invisible spiritual treasure and tried his best to dodge sideways, a huge force still hit his back without any warning. Yin Xuanqu followed this force and abruptly flew forward for over 1,000 feet. He could no longer hold back the blood in his heart, and he directly spat out an arrow of blood 3 feet away. Then, it turned into a blood-colored ice cube that emitted a chilling aura and fell onto the surface of the sea. The blood Shura, laughing strangely, appeared where Yin Xuanqu had been standing, and the previous illusion turned into a pool of water and fell from midair. Damn! It was exactly the same as the art of deceiving the heavens and sea. At this moment, a loud bang suddenly came from the direction of Soundwave Island in the distance, followed by shouts of killing. Yin Xuanqu's heart trembled. Oh no! The island's protective formation was broken. Yin Xuanqu wanted to retreat. He had to rush back to Soundwave Island. At the very least, he had to rescue Qi Lianying. However, he had neglected the fact that he was heavily injured. How could he retreat just because he wanted to? Moreover, there was a blood Shura eyeing him covetously. At this moment, this blood Shura seemed to be even more anxious than he was. With a howl, it pounced towards Yin Xuanqu. A strange force firmly bound Yin Xuanqu in midair. Even if he wanted to hide himself, he would have to expend a great deal of energy to break through this restraint. If Yin Xuanqu still had his strength, it would naturally not be a problem. However, how could he escape now that he was seriously injured? Yin Xuanqu sighed. He knew that he could not escape, but he was not someone who would close his eyes and wait for death. His heart was already beating rapidly in his chest, waiting for the blood Shura to reach him to trigger a self-explosion. Howl! A strange howl suddenly cut through the sky. Yin Xuanqu suddenly looked up and saw that a door had suddenly split open in front of him. A pair of familiar flying swords shot out from the door and slashed towards the void. Clang! A strange long sword appeared in front of Yin Xuanqu for the first time. It was blocked by the thin flowing water sword in front of Yin Xuanqu. At the same time, that strange howl also seemed to cut through the restraints of space and stabbed towards the back of Blood Shura's head. Blood Shura looked extremely panicked at this moment. He stood there, unable to move, and the expression on his face had already frozen. Splash! The nether water sword flashed and disappeared, but it split open a pool of water. Dozens of feet away, Blood Shura revealed itself, and was about to retreat quickly. However, its appearance did not seem to be unexpected by those who had rushed to help. A white light had already shot towards it the moment it appeared. Blood Shura could not dodge in time. The white light sank into its body, and seemed to freeze everything in its body. Kill! A small person suddenly appeared in front of Blood Shura's face. The azure willow sword on its back was pulled out and stabbed directly into Blood Shura's head through its eyes. Chapter 1006. Yin Xuanqu had narrowly escaped death. The thin water-flowing sword in front of him was shaking its head and wagging its tail, as if it was greeting him. Yin Xuanqu spat out a mouthful of blood and looked around, but still did not see Lu Ping appear. He could not help but curse and said, "It's actually teleporting the sword through space. Isn't this a space magic that only mid-Dharma adepts can control?" Immediately after, Yin Xuanqu's gaze turned to the small figure in the distance that was about a foot tall, but looked exactly like Lu Ping. It was Lu Ping's avatar Lu Xiaoping. Lu Xiaoping obviously understood what Yin Xuanqu had said earlier. He made a face at Yin Xuanqu, and then sheathed the willow sword in his hand into the scabbard on his back. He put his left thumb and index finger in his mouth and whistled loudly. The thin water-flowing sword vibrated and immediately circled around in the direction that Lu Xiaoping's right hand was pointing in. Yin Xuanchu's heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that there was an opponent hiding nearby? But he saw that Lu Xiaoping suddenly jump up, and when he landed, he happened to be standing on the thin water-flowing sword. At this moment, the two swords formed a pincer attack from both sides. With a clang, the strange invisible flying sword that Yin Xianchu had seen earlier was once again hit by the thin water-flowing sword. But immediately after, it hit itself again. Yin Xuanchu's face was filled with joy. It was actually that invisible companion's spiritual treasure. Yin Xianchu did not care about his own injuries, and was about to go forward to help. Unexpectedly, he saw two rays of green light suddenly shoot out from Lu Xiaoping's eyes. In an instant, he found the location of the hidden sword and leaped forward, his hands seeming to grab onto something. The hidden sword revealed itself again, but this time, it was grabbed by the hilt by Lu Xiaoping's small hands. The hidden sword was carried by the hidden sword in midair, and the little person swayed as he hung on the hilt. At this time, the thin water-flowing sword also came forward to attack again, to completely suppress the hidden sword. Just as Lu Xiaoping and the dual flying swords worked together to suppress the invisible flying sword, the sky above the place where the water Shura had fallen once again split open. A three-legged wine cauldron rushed out of the opening. A whirlpool of light appeared at the mouth of the cauldron, and the wine cauldron swallowed more than half of the dissipating essence of the fallen water Shura. A little girl suddenly leaned against the side of the wine cauldron and peeked her head out. She smiled at Yin Xianchu and shook her head. Then, the wine cauldron slowly turned, and once again entered the pitch-black spatial crack and disappeared. The spatial crack also slowly closed up. On Soundwave Island, just as Yin Xianchu had been injured by the blood Shura, and was on the verge of death, the island-protecting formation that Qi Lianying was presiding over was finally broken by the attacks of another blood Shura, and more than 100 Mara. Qi Lianying knew that the island was only able to hold on until now, because of the power of the island's protective formation. Although there were nearly 10 core forging realm cultivators on the island, most of them were at the early and mid-stage core forging realm. In the face of the White Jade Devil led by Blood Azura, Soundwave Island was almost defenseless. Why would this group of Mara take a fancy to a small island like Soundwave Island? A great Shura rushed towards Qi Lianying, the companion magic treasure in its hand, carrying the power of a forward charge towards Qi Lianying. Qi Lianying snorted coldly. Her sleeves stirred up a curtain in midair. The companion magic treasure was hindered layer by layer under the curtain. In the end, the power of the magic treasure was dissolved. Then, the pair of sleeves flipped up, forming a curtain wall that enveloped the Great Shura. The Great Shura rushed left and right, but the magic treasure in its hand was useless no matter where it hit. It could not break through the curtain wall. The Great Shura had never encountered such a strange situation. For a moment, it was very anxious. It raised its head and roared, beginning to call for help from its companions. Qi Lianying's face was as gloomy as frost. A pair of short swords appeared in her hands along her sleeves, and then she rushed into the curtain wall with them. The sleeve sword was a magic power that Qi Lianying had practiced. Now, she had used this magic power in such a way that it was as if she was in a maze. A moment later, a scream came from within the curtain wall. The Great Shura, who was equivalent to a late core forging cultivator, had died under Qi Lianying's two swords. The curtain wall turned back into two sleeves, shrinking back into Qi Lianying's sleeves and disappearing. When she looked up, the entire Soundwave Island was already filled with the sounds of fighting, and from time to time, the screams of Soundwave Island's cultivators could be heard. Although Soundwave Island was not her foundation, it was the result of decades of hard work. It was also something she had entrusted to him. Now that it was so easily destroyed, she could not help but feel sad. But she also knew that there was nothing she could do now. Even if she could kill a Great Shura, there were a total of 20 to 30 Great Shuras besieging Soundwave Island. Not to mention that there was still a Blood Shura that had yet to make a move. Escape, only by escaping would there be hope. If all else failed, she could only go to the North Sea to find him. Ji Xianxian and the others had already mentioned Lu Ping to her several times. Then, Qi Lianying seemed to be wearing a colorful robe made of auspicious clouds, and a rock that was spreading its wings and about to take flight looked very lifelike. The combined attacks of the Shuras landed on Qi Lianying, but only a few of the auspicious clouds imprinted on the robe were scattered. As the clouds gathered and dispersed, Qi Lianying was not injured at all. Qi Lianying was overjoyed. After Ji Xianxian came to Soundwave Island, she had asked about Lu Ping's recent situation in detail, and learned that Lu Ping had two great spiritual treasures, one of which was the Golden Rock Cloud Sail. The Golden Rock auspicious cloud robe that she was wearing now was obviously transformed from that cloud sail. Without any worries, Qi Lianying did not care about the continuous attacks from the other three Shuras. The short sword in her hand was hidden in her sleeves, and she only cared about the wood Shura that had whipped her just now. Wu Yan was now also a core forging cultivator, but he knew his own ability. It was already a blessing from the heavens to be able to advance to the core forging stage and have an extra 200 to 300 years of lifespan. In this life, his cultivation would probably not be able to advance even an inch. However, at this time, looking at the 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras in front of him, he was a little envious of Hong Ying and Yi Buki. Hong Ying was currently preparing to condense a heaven and earth spiritual object to advance to the mid-stage of the core forging stage, while Yi Buki was already at the 4th stage of the core forging stage. He was almost the strongest in the entire island apart from the 3 Vice Island Lords. If he had the cultivation of the 2 of them, he could fight the current situation head-on. Even if he failed, he would have a chance to escape. However, facing the siege of 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras that were only equivalent to the late stage of the blood condensation realm, Wu Yan actually felt powerless. His death was not to be regretted, but behind him was the treasure vault of Soundwave Island. All the resources accumulated over the years were in this treasure vault. More importantly, there was Wu Yan's own pair of children in the treasure vault. Deputy Island Master Ji had once said that his son and daughter were qualified to enter Zhenling sect. In the future, they might even have the chance to become Zhenling sect's inner sect disciples. He, Wu Yan, had already reached the end of his life, but no matter what, he had to fight for his son and daughter. The 7 or 8 minor repairs Shuras obviously did not expect that although the human cultivator in front of them was only at the core forging stage, he was actually like a silver spear tip made of wax. He could not even withstand the siege of several people. Although the door behind this human cultivator was sealed, the aura inside could not be hidden from the Shuras, who were born to devour spirits. Chapter 1007. The same scene was playing out all over Soundwave Island. Hong Ying was being beaten by a great Shura and was running away like a rat. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly found that the vines in the surrounding forest were wrapping around the great Shura's body from all directions. This great Shura was also a wood Shura. Seeing this, it activated its innate magical power, wanting to fight the hidden enemy. However, it suddenly found that the grass, trees, bamboo, and vines that it used to command like an arm were not listening to it at this time. It seemed that there was a higher level of power above it, causing the grass, trees, bamboo, and vines to be dismissive of its innate magical power. The great Azura was quickly entangled. At this time, it already knew fear. It wanted to use the wood escape technique to escape, but at this time, it seemed that the wood escape technique had lost its effect. This time it really panicked. By now, how could Hong Ying not know that someone was secretly helping him? One of the magic treasures in his hand flew out and struck the wood Azura. The wood Azura struggled with all its might and howled in despair, but none of that could save its fate. Hong Ying killed the wood Shura in one blow. He quickly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and said to the surrounding people, "May I ask who helped me?" Hong Ying is very grateful. A little girl stuck her head out from behind a huge tree and coldly glanced at the red eagle. Then she hid behind the huge tree again. The red eagle stared blankly for a moment, only seeing a blooming pink peach blossom on the little girl's head. Yi Buki was now an expert at the 5th level of the core forging realm. His aptitude was far above that of Wu Yan and Hong Ying. Later, he was appreciated by the deputy island master, Yin Xianchu, who gave him some pointers. Naturally, his cultivation level rose all the way. However, 3 of his 5 sworn brothers failed to make it through the bottleneck of condensing their gold cores, and eventually died of old age. The other 2 managed to condense their gold cores with the help of Yu Jiangrui and Yin Xianchu, but their strength was only slightly stronger than Wu Yan's. It was wishful thinking for them to advance further. After the chaotic battle on the island, he didn't know where they were now, or if they were still alive. At this moment, a great Shura suddenly rushed over from the opposite side. Ibuki was shocked. Just now, he had escaped from a great Shura equivalent to the late core forging realm, but the strength of the great Shura in front of him was obviously above that of the previous one. Ibuki's heart could not help but sink. He crossed the 2 water-splitting spikes in his hands. He gritted his teeth and thought to himself, "I'm going all out." Then, he used all his strength to charge at the Azura in front of him. The great Shura looked very anxious. Madame Du was greatly shocked. Her 10 fingers grew long nails, and she brought out a horsetail whisk from her storage magic artifact. The horsetail whisk was somewhat peculiar. It was fluffy like a fox's tail. Truth be told, this horsetail whisk was a magic treasure forged from the tail of Madame Du's fleshly body after she had taken over the body. Madame Du's strength was at most at the early stage of core forging. Even though she had the experience of being at the late stage of core forging, it could only help her endure a little longer under the siege of Mara. Even so, Madame Du was still surrounded by a few Mara, and was covered in wounds. The dripping blood further fueled Mara's rage. Soon, Madame Du suffered another heavy injury. Seeing that Madame Du was about to die here, a great Azura pounced towards Madame Du with a sinister smile. However, it suddenly tilted its neck back, and used its hands to grab at the area below its neck. A rope had been strangled there at some point. The great Azura's body that was leaning forward suddenly flew backwards, and its head was separated midway. Then, there was an explosion in the air, and a whip shadow swept over once again. A devil Azura could not dodge in time, and was whipped out of the black mist. It fell to the ground, and twitched a few times before it could no longer move. Before Madame Du fainted, she saw a girl who was not much younger than her daughter, holding a long whip in her hand. Every time the whip lashed out, Amara would be whipped away. The pair of short daggers in Lu Linger's hands danced up and down, but they only protected her whole body. Meanwhile, she was using her Ice Soul divine ability. Every time she launched an attack in the air, a Shura or Shioma would be frozen into an ice sculpture. Every time an ice sculpture was formed, Lu Linger would chuckle proudly. But once a Shura dodged her Ice Soul divine ability, he would inevitably be chased by Lu Linger, who was full of anger. In the end, he would not stop until he was turned into an ice sculpture. Ling, father wants you to find Aunt Ing. Why haven't you gone yet? Lu Bai supported the unconscious Madame Du and walked out of the woods. But when she saw Lu Linger playing happily, her face immediately sank, and she shouted unhappily. Although Lu Linger was naughty, she was very respectful towards her elder sister Lu Bai. Hearing this, she was very unhappy and said, I know. After that, she casually smashed a frozen devil Azura into pieces, then turned into a white light and disappeared. Yu Jiangrui no longer planned to escape. These years of comfortable life on Soundwave Island had made Yu Jiangrui no longer want to live a wandering life. More importantly, his lifespan was running out. Although Yu Jiangrui had reached the core forging realm through Lu Ping's core transferring secret technique, it was only a pseudo-core forging realm cultivation base. It couldn't even compare to Wu Yan's golden core, which was condensed using a secret technique. Yu Jiangrui's golden core wasn't even his. Although he was lucky enough to extend his lifespan by more than 100 years, the golden core in his heart space was gradually aging because it was not nourished by true essence. It was afraid that in a few decades, it would collapse. At that time, his life would also come to an end. Yu Jiangrui looked at his disciple, who was running away with him in front of him. He laughed at himself. Not long ago, he was a pseudo-core forging stage cultivator, But now he had to run away with the late blood condensation cultivator. Tower, go by yourself. Master can't walk anymore. Sima Tao said without turning his head. Master, we are about to escape. As long as we leave Soundwave Island, these Mara may not chase us. Yu Jiangrui cast a glance at the few devils who had quietly caught up to him from afar, and said with a smile, Actually, my lifespan has come to an end. Fortunately, you've already inherited all of my alchemy skills, so I can rest assured now. Sima Tao suddenly felt that there was something wrong with his master's words. Just as he was about to turn around, he felt a huge force pushing him from behind. Sima Tao flew forward involuntarily. Sima Tao panicked. He wanted to stabilize his body in mid-air, but he found that the magic power around his body seemed to be confined and could not be used for the time being. When he turned his body with all his might, he saw that Yu Jiangrui had already rushed toward the few devil luos who were chasing behind him. A storage bag fell from the sky and smashed into Sima Tao the moment he landed. Sima Tao recognized the storage bag. It belonged to his master Yu Jiangrui. Sima Tao grabbed the storage bag and dashed in Yu Jiangrui's direction. However, he suddenly saw his teacher's body turning into a ball of sparks, charging into the midst of a few devil luos and exploding. A wave of heat spread out, and even though Sima Tao was close to the opportunity, he was still sent flying. Master! Sima Tao struggled to get up from the ground, but he saw a few more Azuras rushing towards him from another direction. Sima Tao's hands ignited with 2 balls of fire. He howled and rushed towards Mara. He didn't even care about the accompanying celestial devices that had been thrown out of the hands of the Azuras. A huge tortoise shield suddenly appeared above Sima Tao, blocking all the incoming magic treasures. Then, several sharp blades suddenly extended out from the tortoise shield. The blades buzzed as they spun, slashing at the Maras that were charging at them. The few Mara tried their best to block the attacks, but to no avail. Even their celestial devices were sliced in half at the waist. Xiao Sima, do you still remember me? A tall, good-natured young man appeared in front of Xiao Sima and chuckled. Chapter 1008. Chu Hailan saw with his own eyes that Lu Ping had sent the thin stream sword, the cloud sail, and the Linglong wine cauldron through the air, using a technique that only mid-Dharma adepts could master. Also, a foot-long puppet had flown out with them? No, that was a body double. Chu Hailan, who was born and raised in the Green Sea Snakes, was naturally knowledgeable and had heard of the body double technique. It was said that this was one of the highest achievements in the art of puppetry. However, even after Lu Ping had sent out all these powerful treasures and spirit treasures, the blood Shura in front of him was still unable to gain any advantage over Lu Ping. Moreover, as the battle dragged on, Lu Ping seemed to be gaining the upper hand. What kind of monster was this? Even Chu Haitian, the strongest of the 3 generations of Green Sea Snakes adepts, was only as strong as this when he was at the early Dharma stage. The blood Azura was a fire Azura that was rarely seen in the overseas cultivation world. It looked like a fire spirit. Wherever it passed, sparks would be left behind, even in the air. It was as if it was going to burn through the space. This fire Shura's innate magical powers were extremely powerful. Since the start of the battle, Lu Ping had seen the fire Shura use at least 5 types of flames. Among them, there were 3 heaven-level spiritual fires and 2 high-level mystical fires, not to mention the other low-level fires. Both Lu Ping and Chu Hailan's eyes lit up as they watched. Even the 7 treasures Thunder Calabash seemed to have sensed something and jumped up and down in the core space. It only calmed down after being slapped hard by the Dharma power of the dragon. Every blood Shura would have an extremely powerful accompanying spiritual treasure after becoming a blood Shura. These accompanying spiritual treasures came in all shapes and sizes, and their effects were often different. The accompanying spiritual treasure in the fire Shura's hand was obviously a treasure that could simulate all kinds of fire seeds in the world. However, Lu Ping's methods were not inferior to this fire Shura's. Although he did not have any handy spiritual treasures or treasures, Lu Ping could use his own magical powers to fight evenly with this fire Shura. It was not that Chu Hailan was unwilling to come out and help Lu Ping, But when Lu Ping arrived at Soundwave Island and found this strange fire Shura, he had the idea of capturing and killing it. He wanted Chu Hailan to hide in the side and block the Shura's path when it was ready to escape. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Chu Hailan did not appear on the battlefield, but hid in the void, ready to strike at any time. Then, he saw a fire tiger roaring through the dense rain and pouncing on Lu Ping. Lu Ping's eyes widened in surprise as he saw a fire tiger pouncing through the rain. Lu Ping could not dodge in time and was pounced on by the fire tiger. His whole body was turned into water in the fire tiger's mouth and then evaporated. Seeing that things were not going well, the fire Shura turned into a ball of fire and rushed toward the fire tiger. At this time, in the sea of fire formed by the fire Shura, a space door suddenly cracked open. The space that was about to collapse from the fire Shura's innate fire magic could be forcibly torn open by Lu Ping. Both the fire Shura and Chu Hailan, who was hiding at the side, were shocked. Lu Ping stepped out of the space door, and the surrounding flames licked at Lu Ping, but an invisible force spread out with Lu Ping as the center, clearing a distance of 10 feet. The fire Shura ran all the way through the rain curtain, formed by the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain. Its whole body looked a little weak, but when it stepped on the fire tiger, its whole body began to emit green flames again. Suddenly refreshed, it turned around and pounced on Lu Ping again. However, Lu Ping smiled and clenched his open palm tightly. The dark blue field created by Lu Ping, where the fire Shura stood, suddenly rolled up waves, and each wave turned into a water sword, stabbing at the fire Shura from all directions. Thousand Snow Sword Art. The fire Shura looked a little panicked at this time. It had already seen that this was a trap set by Lu Ping, whose original purpose was to separate it from the companion spiritual treasure that had turned into the fire tiger. That was why it rushed into the water field created by Lu Ping to meet the fire tiger. However, when it got in, it found that it was another trap. But after meeting the companion spiritual treasure, the fire Shura was obviously much calmer. The fire tiger suddenly stood up and dismembered in midair, turning into countless fire ravens, fire scorpions, fire cicadas, fire rats, fire wolves, and fire sparrows. They rushed towards the water swords coming from all directions, wiping out the great magic sword art formed by flowing water in an instant. The fire Shura turned over and wanted to use the same method to fight back against Lu Ping, who had entered the fire field it had created earlier, but found that the flame fortress it had painstakingly created had long been extinguished by the art of traveling through clouds and summoning rain above Lu Ping's head. The fire Shura was shocked and was about to turn around and retreat, but it noticed that Lu Ping seemed to be moving again. When it turned around, it saw clouds of water gathering from all directions, with Lu Ping as the center, slowly forming a bigger and bigger cloud. The cloud stretched longer and longer until it entered the sea. Waves of seawater were sucked up along the cloud, turning the huge cloud into a real water tornado. After the dazzling changes of Lu Ping's fingers, the water tornado gradually began to twist and spiral. Finally, a head, horns, limbs, tail, and the scales that gradually formed on the surface of the water tornado appeared one by one, finally forming a strange water dragon that was dozens of feet long and 6 feet thick. The water dragon opened its mouth and hissed. A loud roar suddenly burst forth, and the flames around the fire Shura were extinguished in an instant. Fear appeared on its face, and even Chu Hailan, who was hiding at the side, felt a kind of palpitation at this moment. Fortunately, this feeling passed in a flash, and the huge strange water dragon had already rushed behind the fire Shura. Lu Ping didn't expect that the combination of the water manipulation scripture and the green Jiao Sea disturbance scripture would be so powerful. As the fire Azura fled, he activated the spirit treasure in his hand and set up 12 fire walls and fire shields in a row. However, the water Jiao easily broke through all of the 12 fire walls and fire shields. Seeing that the situation was not good, the fire Shura combined with the companion spiritual treasure in its hand and turned into a rainbow light to escape, but there was a soft snort in its ear, and suddenly there were countless fire snakes in front of it, colliding with the rainbow light. The rainbow light was broken, and the fire Shura staggered out of it, but saw a female practitioner standing in front of it. In the past, although the female practitioner was strong, she was definitely no match for the fire Shura. But at this moment of life and death, the person in front of it was the last straw to end its life. The huge water dragon rushed over and swallowed the fire Shura, who could not escape in one gulp. A fiery red light suddenly rolled down the water dragon's throat. The tens of feet long body of the water dragon began to shrink rapidly, and a large amount of water mist began to evaporate. At the same time, the water dragon's thick waist shrank, and with the consumption of the water dragon itself, the red light in its belly became dimmer and dimmer, until the water dragon was only 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, and there was only a red light the size of a bean left in its belly. Only then did Lu Ping wipe the sweat on his forehead and let out a long sigh of relief. In this fight, Lu Ping did not have much of an upper hand, and was purely using his strong real essence to exhaust the opponent to death. At this time, the real essence in his body was also greatly consumed. But at this moment, Chu Hailan suddenly made a move, and in mid-air, a few feet long flame snake tongue stretched out, shooting towards the red light in the body of the fire dragon. Chapter 1009. Just as the fire snake's tongue was about to reach into the water serpent's abdomen and suck out the red light, the strange serpent suddenly swung its tail and extinguished the fire snake's tongue with a pop. Chu Hailan giggled and said, "Lu Daoyou's water attribute skills have reached the pinnacle. What's the use of this fire Azura's fire seed? Why don't you give it to me?" Although Chu Hailan was joking, her hands were not idle at all. She flicked her hands one after another, and each time a flame burst out, it formed a wriggling fire snake in the air and surrounded the strange serpent. Chu Hailan knew that this was the best time to gain an advantage from Lu Ping. If Lu Ping recovered even a little bit, she would no longer have the slightest hope. Although Lu Ping had used his abundant spiritual ether to exhaust a fire Azura to death, it also consumed a lot of his spiritual ether. But this did not mean that Lu Ping had no power to fight back. Seeing that dozens of fire snakes had surrounded it, the strange serpent opened its mouth and spat out a huge wave, extinguishing most of the dozens of fire snakes in front of it. Chu Hailan's expression changed, but she immediately noticed that the strange serpent, which was originally 30 feet long, had shrunk to another 15 feet after spitting out this mouthful of water. Her face was full of smiles again, and she said, "Why are you so stubborn? Why don't you give this fire seed to me, and I'll write off the favor you asked me to help earlier?" As she spoke, the remaining dozens of fire snakes had their heads and tails severed, but their severed bodies grew back into new fire snakes, once again surrounding the shortened strange serpent. Lu Ping smiled and said, "You really know how to pick a time. Are you sure that I don't have the power to fight back?" Chu Hailan's beautiful eyes flickered with suspicion, but when she looked at the flame that was still stubbornly flickering in the strange dragon's belly, she immediately regained her confidence and said, "You and I both know that this fire seed must be extraordinary. Even if we meet other fire Azuras in the future, we may not be able to obtain such a strange treasure. If we don't fight for it, we will regret it in the future." In the battle between Lu Ping and the fire Azura, the endless tricks that he used not only shocked the fire Azura, but also terrified Chu Hailan. However, she was unwilling to give up this fire seed that could simulate various forms of spiritual fire. "Fine. If you didn't intercept the fire Azura in the end, I would only be able to heavily injure it at most, and it would be extremely difficult to kill it. In this way, you do indeed have the qualifications to fight for it, but you're taking advantage of its misfortune." Chu Hailan smiled proudly and said, "If not, how would I dare to compete with you?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "That's right. If that's the case, just fight for it." Chu Hailan smiled and said, "You're an arrow at the end of its flight, and yet you still want to show off." After saying that, dozens of fire snakes pounced and fought with the strange dragon. Although the strange flood dragon's body was huge, it was formed from ordinary seawater that was infused with Lu Ping's true essence. Thus, it was innately inferior to the strange flood dragon. On the other hand, Although Chu Haelin's fire snakes were petite, they were agile. Moreover, the flames that formed them were also extraordinary. The two were entangled in battle. Although the monstrous flood dragon relied on its powerful legs to extinguish more than 10 fire snakes, it was also greatly exhausted. In a short period of time, it was only 7 or 8 feet long, and the red light in its abdomen was becoming more and more obvious. From the beginning to the end, the two of them didn't attack each other. They only fought for the fire seed that was swallowed by Lu Ping's water jiao. This could be considered a fair method of competition in the cultivation world, to avoid unequal distribution of spoils that could lead to vendettas. Seeing that she was about to succeed, Chu Hailan became more and more complacent. She kept smiling at Lu Ping, but her hands did not slow down at all. As she performed a series of incantations, sufficient spiritual vitality was constantly injected into the bodies of the fire snakes through the air, under the guidance of her divine thoughts, making the attacks of the fire snakes more and more fierce. On the other hand, Lu Ping controlled the water snake with divine thoughts from beginning to end, and did not inject any spiritual vitality into it at all. Seeing that the water snake was becoming smaller and smaller under the siege of the fire snakes, Chu Hailan became more and more complacent, but Lu Ping appeared to be extremely indifferent from beginning to end, as if he did not care at all. However, the more it was like this, the less confident Chu Hailan felt. Although she had the upper hand and had been very proud of herself to provoke Lu Ping, in fact, she wanted to force out Lu Ping's hidden methods so that she could be prepared. However, Lu Ping did not comply with her wishes. From beginning to end, it was a severely injured water snake that fought with her, not even injecting spiritual vitality into it. Could it be that he was really an arrow at the end of its flight? Even Chu Hailan herself did not want to believe this conclusion. Pa! With a splash, the water snake that had already shrunk to 3 feet could no longer resist the siege of the fire snakes. One of the fire snakes took the opportunity to swing its tail and smash the head of the water snake into a splash. The remaining 10 or so fire snakes burrowed into the body of the water snake that had lost its head. At the same time, the fire snake that had just disappeared reappeared and tried to suck in the body of the fire snake. Seeing that the fire seed was about to fall into Chu Hailan's hand, the headless water snake suddenly exploded, and the mist scattered in all directions, stirring up a wave. Although the force of the wave was not very strong, it just happened to block all of Chu Hailan's attacks. At this moment, there was a sudden whistling sound that cut through the air. Chu Hailan's expression changed, and just as she was about to move, she saw a small person appear in front of the fire seed. The small person grabbed the fire seed in his hand, and then stretched out his hand to pull out the willow sword on his back and slashed, severing the 10 or so fire snakes, and the flaming fire snake's tongue in the air. This is cheating. Seeing that the fire seed in her hand was snatched away by Lu Xiaoping, Chu Hailan's face suddenly became angry. You have the help of an avatar. How is this fair competition? Lu Ping looked at the maddened Chu Hailan with a smile, and spread out his palm, and the Linglong wine cauldron drilled out of the space door, and fell right into his palm. A little girl leaned on the side of the wine cauldron, and made a face at Chu Hailan, and then immediately disappeared along with the wine cauldron in Lu Ping's palm. At the same time, the 2 flying swords also appeared from the space door, and after circling around Lu Ping twice, they also sank into Lu Ping's body. Chu Hailan's mood suddenly stagnated, and when she finally suppressed her anger with great difficulty, she said with great dissatisfaction, "What, do you still want to threaten me?" Lu Ping said slowly, "Don't forget that when you attacked just now, my true essence was greatly depleted. You can be said to be taking advantage of my misfortune. Since that's the case, why can't I join the battle with my avatar? Don't forget, from the beginning to the end, I did not inject a trace of Zhen Yuan into the water dragon. Everyone just relied on their own ability." Chu Hailan angrily shook her hand. "Anyway, the fire seed is already in your hands. Naturally you can do whatever you want." Lu Xiaohai smashed the head of a great Azura with a hammer, and then flew out the other copper hammer, smashing 3 minor repairs Azuras in a row, and looked around, but there were no more Azuras in his field of vision. The giant white-fronted tiger raised its head to the sky and roared, causing the entire Soundwave Island to tremble. Oh, awesome, awesome, oh. Damn, Xiaohai, stop shouting. Who doesn't know that your voice is the loudest? Lu Linger covered her ears with her hands, jumped out from the other side of Hearing Waves Island, and shouted at Lu Xiaohai from afar. Her sharp voice could not even cover the roar of the giant white-fronted tiger. Lu Xiaohai's voice was not only louder. Qi Lianying, wearing the golden rock cloud robe, walked behind Lu Linger and looked at Lu Xiaohai, who was waving a pair of huge copper hammers, and could not help but laugh. Is this the white-fronted tiger clan? It seems that these years, the number of monster clan followers under him has increased a lot. That shy little girl's background is not simple, right? Debeo came out of nowhere and said, You mean the peach blossom little sister? You should have seen her. Do you remember the spirit monster peach tree that boss obtained? Qi Lianying was surprised. The spirit monster peach tree? She also transformed. Isn't it said that it is the hardest for spirit monsters to transform? Debao proudly patted his chest and said, Of course I had a fortuitous encounter. Following boss, who among us has less fortuitous encounters? Big sistering. When have you ever seen a core forging stage spirit-seeking mouse? Qi Lianying giggled and said, Other than you, I have not seen a core forging stage spirit-seeking mouse, but I have heard of a blood condensation stage spirit-seeking mouse called Little White. Debeo's face turned red, and he said, Big sistering, who did you hear this from? Then, as if thinking of something, Debeo gritted his teeth and said, Yes, it must be the bastard friend of boss Ji Xianxian. Last time, this guy actually sneaked into the underground auction of Huangli Island and saw Little White, who had already swallowed the transformation pill hosting the auction. After that, he wanted to take Little White away no matter what. In the end, if I did not invite sister-in-law over, this guy would have succeeded. When Qi Lianying heard Debeo mention Hu Lily, the smile on her face immediately disappeared. With how smart Debeo was, he was first-rate in observing people's words and body language. How could he not figure out what Qi Lianying was thinking? It was just that he deliberately said it this way, not without the intention of reminding her. Lu Ping slowly descended from the sky above Soundwave Island, and Qi Lianying stared blankly at Lu Ping. Seeing that the situation was not good, Debeo hurriedly said, I will go check the treasury with that guy Wu Yan. After saying that, he dived headfirst into the ground and disappeared without a trace. Qi Lianying smiled at Lu Ping, who had landed in front of her, and said, Fortunately, you came in time, or your foundation would only be left with a deserted island. Lu Ping smiled and said, As long as I'm here, this island is lost. It's not a big deal. It's just 3 blood azuras. Why would they cause such a huge commotion? Qi Lianying also shook her head strangely and said, I don't know either. This siege came suddenly, without the slightest sign. If it wasn't for Xuanchu's vigilance, I'm afraid that even the island's protective formation would not have been activated in time. Lu Ping turned his head to look into the distance, and said, The battle here is in full swing. Logically speaking, the cultivators of the 3 families island on the 2 nearby islands should also know about it. However, when I looked from the sky above Soundwave Island, it was lifeless there. Did they also encounter a great calamity? Chapter 10:10. A ray of light flashed, and Yin Xianchu descended from it. How is it? Lu Ping asked. Yin Xuanchu's expression was ugly. He shook his head and said, They're all dead. All the cultivators on the island have turned into dried corpses. The spirit veins have disappeared, and their storage artifacts have been shattered. Not a single item containing spiritual qi is left. Many cultivators had lifeless eyes when they died. Clearly, they were devoured by a demonic cultivator. Sure enough, it's not just Soundwave Island that's being besieged. Fortunately, Soundwave Island withstood the siege, while the other 2 islands have fallen. Qi Lianying said doubtfully, That's not right. If the other 2 islands were also besieged, Mara's attack on Soundwave Island would have been blocked. They should have come to help. How come? Lu Ping had a bad feeling in his heart. He suddenly raised his head and said, The middle-sized spirit stone vein on the nameless island is most likely dead. Qi Lianying said. I'll send someone to investigate. Lu Ping stretched out a hand to stop them and said, both of you are injured. Besides, if the spirit stone mine on the nameless island is really occupied by Mo Luo, the rest of us will only be courting death if we go there. Let's heal our injuries first. Lu Ping whistled toward the forest in the distance. A green wand soared into the sky and flew out of Soundwave Island toward the nameless island in the west. Not far away, Wu Yan, Hong Ying, Yi Buqi, Madame Du, and her daughter Du Jiawei all came to greet Lu Ping. Lu Ping encouraged them one by one and arranged for them to first restore the island's protective formation. Then, he counted the losses and comforted and compensated the families of the injured and fallen cultivators. Yin Xianxu had already disappeared after getting some healing pills from Lu Ping. Lu Ping and Qi Lianying returned to the cave residence that Qi Lianying had always kept for Lu Ping. Lu Ping's cave abode was the source of the entire spirit vein on Tingtao Island. Now the density of the spirit qi here was close to that of a mid-sized spirit vein, which was obviously the result of Qi Lianying's painstaking efforts. Lu Ping looked at Qi Lianying's delicate face. He didn't know what it looked like under the seal. He sighed and said, you are still injured. Rest for a while. You will be in charge of everything on this island. I won't be staying here for long. Qi Lianying's face darkened. These injuries are nothing. With the protection of your Dharma treasure, I didn't get injured again. Lu Ping nodded and said, this time, I came to the East Sea under the orders of an elder of the sect to kill someone. I'm afraid I'll have to leave soon. Lu Ping paused. Qi Lianying stared at his face, so Lu Ping had no choice but to continue. I'm afraid I won't be able to accompany you to the North Sea for a while. I wonder how much of your memory has been restored. Should the seal on your face be removed now? Qi Lianying touched her face and smiled. Ever since I woke up, the first person I saw was Aunt May. This face has been with me for more than 100 years. If it suddenly changes, I'm afraid even I won't be able to tell which one is me. The two looked at each other in silence. Qi Lianying suddenly smiled and said, you Yin Xianxu and Ji Xianxian probably have some guesses about my identity, right? Lu Ping was a little surprised. He then sighed and said, don't worry. Just return to the North Sea when the time comes. This may involve the grudges between the elders of the sect, but Junling has me to protect you. Even Martial Granduncle Tianxiang won't let you suffer any grievances. A smile flickered in Qi Lianying's eyes. She said, that's not necessarily true. If mysterious fox sage comes to trouble you, what will you do? Lu Ping was dumbfounded. The news that Lu Qiner sent back was very fast. The nameless island has been occupied by Mara. There's a bloody Mara's aura on it, so I don't dare to go near it. However, the Mara there is moving on a large scale. Groups of Mara are flying towards the North Sea. After receiving the news, Lu Ping called for Yin Xianxu and Qi Lianying. At the same time, he also called for Wu Yan, Hong Ying, and Yi Buqi. He originally wanted to call Yu Jiangrui, but he found out that Yu Jiangrui had died in order to save his disciple. His disciple was none other than the Sima, who wanted to learn alchemy under Lu Ping. Lu Ping told everyone the news that Lu Qiner had received. He said, Qiner's news has confirmed my guess. Mara is moving north on a large scale. The Nameless Island, Soundwave Island, and 2 of the 3 islands that are occupied by the 2 forces happen to be on the route of Mara's advance. That's why they were destroyed. Yin Xianxu also realized something at this moment. He said, could it be that Mara is moving north on a large scale because of the giant spirit stone veins and large spirit stone veins in the depths of the fallen secret realm near the Phantom City? Lu Ping nodded and said, other than the temptation of these veins, I really can't think of anything else that could attract Mara to move north on a large scale. Just as Lu Ping said this, he suddenly sensed something in his divine will. At this moment, Qi Lianying and Yin Xianxu also sensed something. Almost at the same time, they waved their hands, and 2 telepathic swords flew into the cave. After the 2 of them checked the contents, Yin Xianxu gestured for Qi Lianying to speak first. Qi Lianying nodded and said in a low voice, I just received news that Mara is moving north on a large scale. Almost half of the islands under the Northern Alliance's control have been wiped out, and there are many casualties. It is said that at least 7 or 8 Dharma adepts of the Northern Alliance and its affiliated forces have fallen, including 2 mid-Dharma adepts. Chapter 10:11. The setting up of the teleportation formation required a Dharma adept to carry a teleportation formation plate with him and communicate with the power of space along the way. Although this was not a problem for Lu Ping, the only problem was that the process could not be interrupted. Even so, Lu Ping was bored out of his mind, so he took out 2 of his biggest gains from his trip to Hearing Waves Island. The first was naturally the invisible flying sword that Lu Xiaoping had obtained after killing the water Shura. This flying sword was completely colorless and transparent. Only when it was attacked by other treasures and invaded by the opponent's inner yuan would it appear in different colors because of the opponent's inner yuan. Moreover, this hidden sword had excellent invisibility. No matter how one looked at it, its quality was better than the water spirit sword in Lu Ping's hands. It was just that this hidden sword was a companion spiritual treasure. Although it had been saved after Lu Ping had killed the blood Shura, in Lu Ping's hands, it could only be used as an ordinary treasure. As for its invisibility effect, it could not be used at all. Lu Ping knew that this was because this companion spiritual treasure had not been modified. This caused the hidden sword to treat all inner yuan other than the fallen blood Shura as an invasion from the outside. Therefore, after Lu Ping's inner yuan was injected into the sword, not only did the hidden sword lose its invisibility effect, it became a flying sword of blue and purple with a hint of gold. Lu Ping reached out and summoned the blue water spirit sword. He did not know if the two could be combined. If it was successful, perhaps the hidden sword's quality could be improved by another level. If the blood Shura's companion spiritual treasure had only been modified, no matter how good its quality was, it could at most survive the first thunder trial and become a first-class spiritual treasure. To survive the second thunder trial, the spiritual treasure's quality had to be improved again. If this invisible hidden sword could be combined with the water spirit sword, although its quality would definitely be greatly improved, and it would not be a problem to survive the first thunder trial, it would be difficult to save for the second thunder trial. The second treasure was naturally the Fire Azura's fire seed that even Chu Hailan didn't hesitate to fight over with Lu Ping. Lu Ping had thought he was lucky enough to get 2 primordial spirit treasures at once, but the fire Shura had died, and only the origin tinder was left behind. The companion spiritual treasure that Lu Ping was looking forward to didn't actually have the ability to simulate various spirit fires. It could only greatly increase the power of various fire god arts that Fire Azura cast. The Fire Shura's attack was strong enough, but the accompanying spiritual treasure in its hand was strictly an auxiliary spiritual treasure, not an offensive one. The treasure that could simulate various forms of spirit fires was the origin tinder left behind by the Fire Shura after its death. This origin tinder was actually like the Dharma form in a cultivator's core space, but compared to the primordial spirit treasure in Mara's hand, the origin in their bodies was more difficult to obtain. In this case, Lu Ping's luck this time was better than getting 2 primordial spirit treasures. The origin tinder was suspended in Lu Ping's palm, but Lu Ping did not dare to use his real essence to enter it, because Lu Ping's water attribute real essence would not only be repelled by the origin tinder, but would also be immediately damaged by the erosion of Lu Ping's real essence. Lu Ping had already tried it once, and the origin tinder, which was already dying, suddenly became even dimmer after coming into contact with Lu Ping's real essence. Lu Ping thought about it, and put the origin tinder on top of a spirit stone. Then, Lu Ping saw that the spirit stone began to melt like a candle, and the spirit chi contained in it was absorbed by the origin tinder, without the slightest leakage. The origin tinder absorbed the spirit stone in a flash, but because of the invasion of Lu Ping's real essence, the dim origin tinder still could not recover to its previous state. Seeing this, Lu Ping put 7 or 8 spirit stones under the origin tinder. After the origin tinder swallowed them one by one, The dim origin tinder seemed to recover a little. Lu Ping shouted. This was really a bottomless pit of spirit stones. If this thing really had many magical effects like before, who knew how many spirit stones it would take to support these magical effects one by one? Lu Ping pondered for a moment and made up his mind. He took out a top-grade spirit stone and placed it under the fire seed. The flame on the origin tinder, which had always been calm, immediately jumped. Lu Ping cursed inwardly, and his divine sense quickly invaded the flame. Suddenly, a flame appeared in the origin tinder, and under the control of his divine sense, the flame constantly changed. These were the 5 kinds of flames that Lu Ping had seen in the hands of the fire Azura. When Lu Qin carried Lu Ping to Jingzhi Island, the time it took them was about the same as Ji Xianxian's wooden bird puppet. This surprised Lu Ping a little. Ji Xianxian was indeed a grandmaster puppeteer. But then again, when Lu Ping thought about it, Ji Xianxian had secretly kept a lot of good stuff for himself when he created his avatar. It wouldn't be right if the wooden bird puppet was slower. When Lu Ping met Tiankong Laozu had already known about Mara's large-scale northward march. Lu Ping was not too surprised about this. After all, Zhenling had been operating on Jingzhi Island for a long time. It would be unreasonable to say that there were no hidden forces in the East China Sea. Lu Ping handed the array disc in his hand to Daoist Xianpeng. The 2 third-generation disciples, Wei Xuanheng and Su Xianpeng, were old acquaintances of Lu Ping when he first entered Feiling Island. However, as disciples of Daoist Xiansu, they had been stationed on Jingzhi Island and rarely returned to the North Sea. Therefore, they were not prominent among the third-generation disciples of North Sea Zhenling. However, Lu Ping knew that the cultivation achievements of these 2 people were considered outstanding among the third-generation disciples of Zhenling. Wei Xuanheng's cultivation had broken through the late core forging realm. He had sparred with Du Feng before. Although he was no match for Du Feng's murderous swordsmanship that he had honed over the years, his solid cultivation was still recognized by Du Feng. As for Daoist Xianpeng's cultivation, although it had fallen a little, and he was only 1 step away from breaking through to the late core forging realm, Daoist Xianpeng was an array master. His attainments in arrays and prohibitions were not inferior to Black Fox's. It was only because Jingzhi Island was isolated in the East China Sea that the island's protective array formation needed him to guard it. That was why he had been staying on Jingzhi Island all this time. Otherwise, with Daoist Xianpeng's attainments in arrays, he would have been sent back to repair the treasure ship long ago. When Tiankong Laozu saw that Lu Ping had returned, he knew that the siege on Jingzhi Island had been resolved, so he said, "You're back at the right time. From the current situation, this group of Mara is most likely heading for the Spirit Stone Mine in Phantom City. Phantom City has already sent out an edict, requesting all sects that have a share of the Spirit Stone Mine in Phantom City to send Dharma adepts there to help guard it. This is to prevent Mara from taking over the Spirit Stone Mine there." Lu Ping knew the importance of the Spirit Stone Mine there. After all, it was the only large Spirit Stone Mine in the hands of the humans overseas. In addition, there were 4 other branches that were also large mines. Such an important place was related to the supply of spirit stones to the entire overseas training world. Naturally, they could not afford to lose it, so he said, "Do you want me to go on behalf of our sect?" Tiankong Laozu shook his head and said, "According to our sect's share of the mine, we need at least 1 mid-Dharma adept to go this time. So this time, the old man will go personally, but you will have to follow him as well." Lu Ping did not ask for the reason and nodded directly. However, Tiankong Laozu explained, "You will go with the old man. The main reason is that after the various sects have received their share of spirit stones, you will escort them back to the sect." Tiankong Laozu paused, then smiled and said, "This time, Mara is heading north on a large scale, and all the sects are gathered in Phantom City. Although there is a good chance of protecting the 5 large spirit stone mines, we still have to be careful. In the past, every 5 years, the various sects would go to Phantom City to collect their share of spirit stones. One of the tasks of the old man guarding Jingzhi Island is to collect the spirit stones there on time. This time, not only will they be distributed early, but they will also be mined in excess during the battle with Mara. At this moment, Lu Ping seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Senior uncle, do you think that Zhang Shi will also go to Phantom City this time? After all, the Blue Sea sect has a share of the mine there." Tiankong Laozu already knew the purpose of Lu Ping's trip to the East Sea this time. Hearing this, he thought for a moment and said, "It's hard to say. The Blue Sea sect's base in the parish land is a small island that is usually guarded by that little brat Dong Yin. At the last auction in Phantom City, our sect won a great victory and entered the top 5 of the medium-sized sects in one fell swoop, greatly increasing our share. The Blue Sea sect and Xianling sect both returned in defeat. Because Xianling sect has the support of the Crystal Palace, although their ranking dropped 1 place because of our sect, their losses are not that great. The Blue Sea sect, on the other hand, dropped 2 or 3 places. However, because of this, these 2 sects only need to send out 1 early Dharma adept." Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "Since they want to retrieve the Spirit Stone mine, it's hard to say if Dong Yun Laozu is thinking the same thing as you. If Zhang Shi is on the island now, I'm afraid Dong Yun Laozu will also ask Zhang Shi to escort the Spirit Stone mine back first." Tiankong Laozu thought for a moment and nodded. "That's true. At this time, Mara is heading north, and the parish land is in a state of panic. I don't think Dong Yin will be at ease leaving the Spirit Stone mine in the hands of a core forging disciple." Tiankong Laozu saw the killing intent flashing in Lu Ping's eyes. He hesitated for a moment and said, "I won't say anything about working together to defeat the enemy, old man. Although you have defeated him before, it's not easy to kill him. Moreover, the situation in the parish land is changing rapidly. Mara humans and demons are everywhere. It's better to be careful not to let others take advantage of the situation." "Disciple will remember Martial Uncle's words." Lu Ping nodded, but then he seemed to have thought of something. He chuckled and said, "Grand Martial Uncle, we have a chance to get our hands on a mid-sized Spirit Stone mine. Why don't we do something big first?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.